Hello, it is Dog Speaks. Welcome back to yet another stream, which I've not done in absolutely ages. So today, this Sunday, I am here joined by Chanchi Gimbat, who is a regular on my channel. So
Hello.
hello. And yeah, we'll be here for a little bit to talk about what's been in the news the last couple of weeks, what's in the papers today, and basically just the general state of the country under the Conservatives, or what's left of them, whether or not, when is the next general election going to be? Hopefully soon, don't know when. I think I've already made a prediction of when, I think, in my last video. But yeah, so with that said, first off, just to remind people, if you've not already subbed, please sub the channel and like and subscribe and thumbs up and everything else. So yeah, well, so yeah, to start us off, we're gonna go through the front pages.
The papers. The
Sunday papers. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm only going to touch on. We're going to only spend a really brief amount of time on this because actually most of the papers today say the same sort of thing. And if you've seen the news, you probably know what it's going to be about. So I'm going to share my screen, and we all just go through them. All but one of them say the same thing. So let's. Here we go. Sure. So can you see that?
I can see that. That's great.
Okay, well. So yeah, these are the newspaper headlines today, and not really a surprise. The main story is all about Russell Brand and the sex abuse allegations.
These are all, as far as I understand it, these are all quite historic, right?
Yeah, so they date, I think, as far as I'm aware, they date back from like to 2007. But it's only just now that like girls have been coming forward to say, he did this really horrifying thing.
This is his Me Too moment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's been quite a lot of this. What with the NHS, like surgeons.
Yeah,
And
that feeds into that really well.
yeah, so yeah, this is. Well, I suppose Sunak must be liking it because it keeps him off the front pages, and what a shit job he's doing. So
it's a distraction for them, I guess. But I mean, we've had the obvious Jimmy Savile thing that was a few years ago, and Harvey Weinstein, and that was part of the Me Too movement a couple of years back. And now we've got this coming. I mean, there's sex pests everywhere, and yeah, I just don't think it's gonna stop here, unfortunately, because they're in all the workplaces, entertainment especially, media. So yeah, so let's get started. So Sunday Times have gone with accused Russell Brand, sex predator who hid in plain sight. So if you've not already watched this or are aware, Channel 4 dropped a Dispatches documentary last night at 9 o'clock about this breaking story, because I think they did a lot of investigatory work beforehand looking at this. And I think because I got told that it wasn't originally like scheduled in as part of the Channel 4 schedule yesterday, and it got dropped and replaced by another program for this story, apparently. Wow. So just because they've been doing a lot of investigating into like talking to these girls, I think it was about 4 or 5 of them who say that they were like historically assaulted by him when they were teenagers. So
wow.
So yeah, this is what the Times has gone with. So 4 women say they were assaulted by the comedian. 1 claims she was raped. Another of the women says she was groomed at the age of 16 after Star picked her up while she shopped. So yeah, so like like I said, most of the papers focus on this story. I'm not going to go too much into it because it's still sort of an ongoing investigation
Right.
and quite sensitive and actually quite horrifying sort of details of sexual assault and harassment and
all of the details are still being discovered. So
yeah, and actually, I've heard that the Dispatches documentary itself is quite graphic in its detail. So I recommend that you go watch that. I'll watch it at some point as well. And yeah, we'll just let that story get on with coming out.
Like speaking about Brand generally, Russell Brand generally, like back in kind of, he went through that whole "don't vote" thing, didn't he? Where he said
he
there's
used to be
pointless
fairly
voting.
left wing. He started out being quite a lefty, didn't he?
He did, yeah. And then he kind of fell off the wagon.
Yeah.
And just swooped to the right. I mean, I suppose what it is, I mean, and any left-wing YouTuber will tell you this, is that if you go to the right, you do earn more money. It's quite simple. Being right-wing is quite lucrative. Look at Andrew Tate.
Yeah, it would just, it's more like things that you say like shock jock sort of stuff, isn't it?
Yes, Louder a Crowder.
Yeah.
Sargon of Akkad. All of these big right wingers, they have millions of subscribers and they earn millions of pounds doing it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So he started off being like, I quite liked it when he was sort of, because I remember him doing a lot for talking about sort of the injustice of like the unaffordability of like housing and
right.
all that stuff. And he was like a campaigner and activist for that sort of sphere.
He had Miliband on his channel, didn't he? During the 2015 election, and he said, before I said don't vote, but now I'm saying vote for this man.
Yeah,
right?
And he was like a Labour sort of activisty person, and now because he set up his own like YouTube channel, and like I'll be honest, like I did like watch it for a little bit. What's it called? It begins with R. Oh, can't remember what it's called. But now
it's been a while. It's been a good few years since I watched it because he started getting a bit weird. So
he's gone down the rabbit hole a lot, and is just saying conspiracy theories about whatnot, and I don't have time for that. Sorry, you weirdo. So
like the algorithm in YouTube can be really quite weird though, because you have that shorts thing, right? And it's just like pointless scrolling, right?
Yeah.
The amount of like, even though I'm totally left wing, the amount of right wing shit that comes up on that scrolling thing is insane. It's usually about 3-4 videos in. That's something really weirdly right wing, like red pills shit will come up.
I think it's because they want you to click on it. And it's like, oh, let's just see if we'll just dangle this bit of like cheese in front of you and see if you bite. And that's really, it's really creepy.
Brand accused of rape and sexual assault by Mirror.
Yeah, so they've gone with that story as well. And the Mail have also gone with this story, grooming and such like. Comedian Russell Brand was last night accused of raping a businesswoman and grooming a 16-year-old girl for sex. And there's a whole other story, like I think in the Dispatches documentary, where like this girl, Brand like gets a car and picks her up from her school and drives her, gets a taxi driven to his house, and then just does disgusting things to her which she didn't consent to, and it's just horrible. And then so some new people have also gone. Brand accused of rape. Sun also the same. Interestingly, the Sunday Express haven't gone with. I mean, it's on one of the tops.
Hmm.
On page 9, obviously not as important, they don't think.
Oh, this is something different. Millions ditch crisis hit NHS and go private.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So we're going to talk about this a bit later. It's to do with or basically the waiting list for NHS at the moment. This week it was reported that the current NHS waiting list for either referrals or treatment has gone up to about 7.6 million people.
Yeah.
Which is actually it's gone up. That's not gone down. So yeah, Rishi, that was one of Rishi Sunak's pledges to get the waiting list to come down by the end. Is it the end of this year or next year? Next year.
End of this year. Yeah. He said he made those 5 pledges, didn't he? And to cut. Oh God. And he made five pledges. Top one is stop the vote, because they said it's a priority for all the British people, which it isn't.
No, why don't someone vote for that?
So yeah, stop the votes, cut NHS waiting lists, cut inflation, and I can't remember the other 2.
Yeah, no, I can't either, because they're very forgettable.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is something we're going to talk about later, just because it's obviously a failure of Tory policy, where it's almost as if they're like deliberately not dealing with this. Like they're almost wanting people to be left waiting so that they do go private, and then they'll be like, oh, look at all these people going to private healthcare, and like we'll just keep ramping up all the insurance advertising, so that then it proves our point that actually, yes, the NHS isn't working and more people want to go to private hospitals for treatment, and then we have private healthcare. I feel like that's what this is sort of leading us towards.
In Korea, they have like a dual system. So you pay half, and the state or your work pays half, essentially, depending on what package you have, right? But your like income tax. So income tax is somewhere between 3% and 5%, right? So it's really low to begin with. Yeah. So, but then you have like these insurances that go on top that you have to pay, and that brings it up to about let's say 10-15%. So you have your health insurance, then you have like unemployment insurance. When I worked at the nuclear power plant, I had unsafe environment insurance. So you have all of these things that then make it much bigger fee to pay, but it's not like tax in the UK where it's really kind of nebulous, isn't it? Right? You pay 25% tax, but where does it go?
Yeah, you just don't know. It's nothing is ring fenced to anything in particular.
Right. I mean, like national insurance is supposed to be ring fenced for the NHS, right? I mean, that's what I believe it's for. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Think, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah. It should be there for social care and healthcare. But yeah, tax in the UK is very, very nebulous. In Korea, you have this very, very small amount which is known as tax, right? But like I said, it's somewhere between 3% and 5%. But everything else there is a shopping list of other things that you do, and you can say, okay, you can see the benefit of that. If you need to go to the hospital, you can see the benefit of that. They ask you insurance papers, and then depending on the level of your insurance will depend on the level of your pay, right?
Yeah, and you're not left waiting in some corridor for hours and hours.
And if you call an ambulance, one will be there.
Yeah,
like within 20 minutes.
So as it should be, yeah. Whereas like now we're getting to a point in this country where if you call an ambulance, like, should I call an ambulance and be prepared to wait for like 6, 7, 8 hours, and like I'll be sat on my, I'll be like letting somebody, some old poor dear sat, you know, on the floor, on like having fallen down the stairs, and they're just
Well, this
waiting
is
there
it.
for
Yeah, this is what I was speaking to my friend about, my Korean friend. I was like, if you call an ambulance, how long will it take? And it's like
yeah.
within 20 minutes. I was like, okay. And so in the UK, say a poor old woman falls over, breaks a hip, right?
Mhm.
She could be left on that floor for 12
Yeah.
hours,
Mhm.
right? And it's like,
Yeah.
get a taxi, right? And I was like, actually, ambulance, like the 999 people
Mm.
will actually
Paramedic.
advise getting a taxi if it's possible, right? And
Yeah.
it's just like that's
Yeah, like, could
insane.
you get yourself there? Could you get like a
Yeah,
lift from someone?
yeah. Is there
Like,
anybody that can help you?
yeah,
Right?
just like make your own way, like half sort of passed out, half like bleeding out. Can you get can you get yourself to hospital?
Dear, oh dear.
Like, yeah.
So
Um yeah, so yeah, these are the yeah, these are the headlines. We'll just briefly read the first paragraph. So almost 1 million patients will have turned to private healthcare by the end of the year as waiting lists hit record levels, new research reveals. And as faith in the health service dwindles, a Sunday Express poll has found that a quarter of people do not believe the NHS will be around for its 100th birthday in 2048. That's quite sad, that poll.
it is quite sad, isn't it? It
Mm.
is quite sad.
But like,
Um,
I just want to remind people that this is not the fault of the NHS or the doctors or nurses or the staff. It's a direct result of underfunding over the years.
yeah, we're gonna
And
get into the meat and bones and that after the papers,
mm,
I think.
yeah,
Yeah, I've got some interesting stats for you, which are quite eye-opening. Is that all the papers?
yeah. Well, then it just goes to the Daily Star and that, which I didn't think is a
And the
proper
people,
paper.
like,
Yeah,
and those wonderful rags.
these are like comic book. Um, so yeah, that leads us quite nicely on to I've got like a Sky News article about waiting times and things like
Hmm.
that. So I'll have a look at that as well. Okay. So yeah, this is the Sky News article from Thursday, where it says that, like we said just now, that waiting lists hit record high as 7.6 million on hold for routine treatment. Both government and NHS England set the ambition of eliminating all waits of more than 18 months by April this year, excluding exceptionally complex cases or patients who choose to wait longer, and all waits of more than a year by March 2025. The number of people in England waiting to start routine hospital treatment has hit record high. 7.6 million waiting to start treatment, highest number since records began in August 2007, marks the 8th consecutive month of increases. So here's the little graph. So in September 2007, the waiting list was 3.9 million, and now it's gone way up to 7.6 million. So that's over double.
Mm.
Over.
Yeah. 3 million 2014, 4 million 2017, 5 million in 2021, and 7 million in 2022. I mean, you, there is, I suppose, there is kind of a COVID aspect to this as well.
Yeah.
But if you take COVID out of it, so everything up to 2019, they're on a trajectory, right? They're on a clear trajectory of increasing every year since 2010, right?
Yeah.
Every year
Mhm.
since 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a direct result of austerity. Quite
Mm-hmm.
simply.
Yeah,
Simply.
I agree.
It is policy.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Right?
it's ideological. So
Yeah.
I mean, the government always make a big deal about saying, "Oh yes, we're putting like," and this is the same similar thing with other, you know, emergency public services like the police as well or the fire service, where they're like, oh yes, we're putting record amounts of funding, more than ever before, into the NHS or the police or whatever it is. It's like, well, if you actually delve a bit deeper into those numbers, it's all very well saying, oh yes, we're putting record amounts of money in. So, like, for example, here in this case, they say that the government is going to put an extra 200 million this winter. That's a drop in the ocean for what the NHS actually really needs, which is like root and stem reform. And like, secondly, if you look at like demographics and data, you will see that obviously there are more people in this country than there were in like 2007. There's, at the moment, it's about 65, 66 million. So for the amount of money you put into the NHS, you need to be thinking about, you know, is that proportionate to the number of people who are now living in this country who will need extra healthcare and extra social care to come to that? So, you know, it's like, that's not really proportionate. Like, they always say, like, it's record amount of money that we're, you know, it's extra. Like, it's not extra because you've cut so much that what you're now putting back in is not the same or above what you're putting in now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you take inflation into account as well, and it is, and as a proportion of GDP, it's less than you know, 13 years ago, right? And as you said, there's more people, right? So it needs to be bigger, it needs to be more, right? And also you've got more doctors and nurses leaving the service than any before. Less people are joining, yet less people are training than ever before. I mean, it is nonsense. We're putting more money in than yeah. That's because the pound's less worth less than it was.
It's just such a form of like gaslighting. It's like, oh yeah, we're putting more money in, we're putting more resources in. It's like more of this, more of that. It's like, well, it's not like they always get a lot of like reporters and presenters try and like pull them up on this when they try and sort of use this narrative, and they say it's like such and such extra. It's like, it's not extra because you've previously cut the amount of like police officers or the amount of money that was originally put in. So if you've taken something away and then now you're just, you know, trying to put back in, it's not extra, it's the same or less.
Yeah. Cameron's just made a really good point that the NHS poorly spends its money. Take prescriptions. How many is few to buy ibuprofen, but the NHS sources its prescriptions from more expensive sources. Yeah, that's right. Say, for instance, you get prescribed paracetamol from your GP. You then take that prescription to Boots. Boots then, I mean, this is like a box of paracetamol, which is like what, 20-30p, something like that. Yeah, it's been a long time. Right, so Boots then charges a premium to the NHS for that prescription. So yeah, I mean, I said this you know, years ago. It needs to have an audit, right? Where is the money going? How is the money being spent? You know. So but, and this is very, very big caveat, you say yourself, you know, it needs root and branch reform, right? I trust someone, I don't trust Jeremy Hunt to do this, right? For example, actually, who is health minister
now? I don't know off the top of my head.
Jeremy Hunt was because he's chancellor at the moment, right?
Does anyone in the comments know who's the current
who's the health minister? I know who the shadow health minister is. Right, and okay, so let's talk about
Steve Barclay.
Steve Barclay, right? Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't trust him to carry out reforms, because you know it's not going to be patient focused reforms, right? It's going to be business focused reforms. Okay, and Wes Streeting has said the same. right? He said he wants to bring in the private sector to take up some of the slack, some to
Yeah,
cut
I've heard him
waiting
say
lists.
that before.
Yeah. But what he's not done has he's not given the policy what they call a sunshine policy, right?
Mm.
So he's not putting an expiry date on this policy.
Mm.
Now, whenever you do these things, whenever you invite the private sector into a public sector, it acts like a cancer, right? And it eats away at the public sector until essentially you've got nothing left, right? Because what it does is it strips away capacity, right? Take the water, for example.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
It's running at 100% capacity constantly. Then the moment you have any rain,
yeah,
you
I
get
always
shit in the
think
river.
that's really bad. Like, why do that? Like, surely, if you've got the money, which they clearly do. I mean, we're digressing slightly, but like, if they've got the money, which they do because they're making astronomical profits off of their with their shareholders, you can afford the infrastructure to improve it.
Right.
That's a choice that they're making. That they're instead of improving and spending money on the actual services and like utilities that people actually need, like water coming out of the taps and stuff, they choose like it's just piecemeal, like sticking plaster politics where we'll only like make really minor changes to like satisfy people in the short term, but then we're actually just going to continue to filter money.
Well, this is the mindset of the capitalist, right? Okay, I'm running a water service, right? And I've got shareholders to pay, and I'm a shareholder myself, right? Okay. Now the water service is running at 80% capacity. Okay, that gives you an extra 20%. So then, if it rains or you have any leakage, you're able to take up that with that 20%, right? What I see as a capitalist or as a shareholder, hang on a minute, that's 20% profits that I'm not getting. Right. So the first thing that they do when they come in and they buy these assets is they strip away that extra capacity and they sell it off. Right. Just for a quick and easy buck. Right. They sell off that extra. So then you're running at 100% all the time. Because then there's no wastage, right? When it's not wastage at all. It's not wastage. It's there for a reason. It's what James O'Brien says, the gully sucker conundrum, right?
Yeah.
You've got you're paying for these gully suckers every year, but they may only get used one every 5 years or something. You have a torrential rainfall, so you send out the gully suckers and they suck up all the shit from the drains, and then it helps with drainage, right?
But are these like the storm drains that
exactly
come out into rivers and whatnot?
And then they say, well, why are we paying for these gully suckers? They're not being used, so they sell them, right? And then a couple of years later, you have torrential rainfall, waters burst their banks, and there's billions and billions of pounds worth of flood damage because you didn't have the gully sucked, right? So it's a false economy, right? It's a false economy, just short-term money. So
yeah, everything is just so short-termist. There's no that's the thing that just really frustrates me about the whole sort of strategy of this government and like previous governments, that like everything
it's 5 years, isn't it?
Yeah, everything they do is to think about not how to improve things and make things better for the long term. So to like save on things getting worse in the long run. It's how do I satisfy my voter base so that we can get back in like 3, 4, 5 years time, and like what do I need to do to like personally enrich myself and keep myself where I am, rather than actually doing my job, which is to actually serve my constituents and the country, and do what my job title is, like health secretary, environment secretary, chancellor, and like actually look after the money rather than just write everything off when things go badly and just forget that stuff happened.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem generally, but it's more acute now because they know their days are numbered.
Yeah.
So all of the ministers are feathering their bed, trying to make sure that when they do get kicked out of Parliament, if they get kicked out, I think they will, but
They probably
if
will.
they get kicked out of Parliament, that they have a job to go to. Right. So that's literally all they're doing, just treading water, making friends, making sure they've got a sweet lobby job when they finish.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right on that one. I think I think that's what probably Rishi Sunak is thinking about. I mean, as soon as he is chucked out of office, I think that he'll go straight to California with his wife and kids and get his green card reimbursed and just live in America in his rich house and his rich companies and make speeches and keep earning money from that, and he won't care. Like, he probably doesn't care now. I think a lot of them just aren't bothered.
You can hear him in PMQs, right? And whenever he's on an interview and he speaks to the public, he speaks to the public with absolute contempt.
Yeah.
He's like, "Why are you asking me this question? You're mere pleb."
Yeah. Well, one of my last videos was the most recent one I did was I mentioned this, and I was like, just like in a lot of interviews, whenever they're interviewed by Lord Kuenssberg or Question Time, whatever it is, and I find it with people, especially just really unlikable people like Therese Coffey, who just really, like, her contempt comes across like really.
Oh, absolutely.
Really can't be like, oh, I'll just do what I like and I'll profit from these water companies and
you can't afford to eat. Have you tried eating porridge 3 times a day?
And like, oh yeah, we've got the best water quality in the world.
And it's just like, no.
What? Like, yes, she said, like, yeah, the quality of our water in our rivers and seas is the best it's ever been. What? What?
Do you hear about the triathlon that they had in England? And like 50 of the swimmers got sick from the swimming portion.
Yes, that was fairly recently, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, what? That's disgusting.
Yeah. You've got to be careful about doing the wild swimming these days, because make sure it doesn't go in your mouth. I get told. But yeah, that's the we're talking about the NHS just now, but it all feeds into the same sort of thing, whereby public services like health, like water, like the police, like crime, like schools, like education, like everything is just falling apart. Like
going back to the police, right? So just quickly, just as a side note, so they cut 20,000 police officers, but not just police officers, back office staff, that kind of thing, right? And now they're like, oh yeah, but we've hired 20,000 police officers, right? And it's like, okay, same problem as the NHS. All you're doing is replacing what you cut, right? But what they did is after they cut the police, they noticed that crime was going up, and people can't get a police officer when they need one, etc., etc., etc. Right. So what they did is they went on a mad dash to employ loads of police officers. But what they found is, and what we're finding now, is that they're not doing their vetting process as well as they should. So
and sexual predators.
Exactly.
Look at the Met Police.
Yes. Yeah. So it's quality, not quantity, right? And back in the day, you had quality police officers, Bobbies on the beat, for instance, and they were policing with intelligence, right? Not through racism or bigotries or whatever. Yeah. So this is the problem that we've had over the last 8, 10, years.
13 years. Yeah.
That it started 13 years ago, and they're mad dash trying to fix it. Like you said, sticking past the politics. So yeah, that was just my little bit on the police
Yeah.
force.
I think the sticking plaster politics phrase has come from Keir Starmer because he uses that quite a lot in PMQs. So I nicked that from him.
Oh well.
But yeah, like just as a an add-on to the police thing, where the Home Secretary Suella Braverman, she's recently been on one saying, yeah, we're gonna get police to investigate every single crime.
Yeah, good luck.
Every single crime. Like, well, best of luck because you've cut resources, you've cut the number of like actual policemen and police people, and so yeah, how are you going to achieve that then? With
how are you going to do it? Yeah,
doing more with less.
yeah. We're going to investigate every single shoplifting.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah, and it's like, hang on a minute, they're putting security tags on baby formula and nappies, right?
Yeah.
Now tell me, what kind of society, if a woman is stealing food to feed her children, that's not a crime? There's something deeply sick about society where that happens.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I think a lot of Twitter was I saw a few tweets of like talking about this sort of thing, and people like, well, if I saw somebody like shoplifting and things like baby formula and like milk and stuff, what would you actually say anything? Like, would you report it? Probably not.
I used to work in a convenience store. It was probably the worst job I've ever had, right? And we used to have shoplifters in like almost on a daily basis, right? And I was very young, very stupid, and I used to go after them as much as I could, right? Except if they were stealing food, right? And then I wouldn't. So, for instance, get an example. I've got two examples for you. A guy came in and he stole 4 cans of beer and a microwave lasagna, right? And when I took the bag off him, I said, you've been stealing, right? I got you on camera. He was like, yeah, fair cop, like kind of thing. I opened his bag, took out the beer and gave him the bag back to him with the lasagna in it. Okay, so that's the first example.
Yeah.
Another example was a young girl came in and she was in the queue. We were quite busy. And she had a big packet of nappies, right? And as she was getting closer, because the till's right by the door, right?
Yeah.
She just darted for the door, and I was like, ah! And I just saw her running down the road like this. How did this pack? I was like, nah, I ain't touching that one. Right?
What's it going to achieve? Like,
exactly.
How far is it going to get you to report it, call the police?
Oh, it used to be a nightmare.
There's no point.
It was a nightmare.
Let them.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. It's just really sad. At the end of the day, like, this is what we've been reduced to as a country.
It is sad.
People are shoplifting essentials because they can't afford. Like, they have to choose what they spend money on because cost of living. More and more people are using food banks. More and more people are homeless.
More food banks than McDonald's
are being made homeless because they can't afford mortgages and the stress of that. Can't afford heating.
Can I ask a question? Because I haven't been in the UK for a long time, so all of this I see from the outside, right? Because I'm not in there living it. It's just information that I get from news or whatever.
Yeah.
So, how much is a pint of milk now? So when I came to Korea, a pint of milk was around 40 pence.
Yeah, I think at the moment it's just shy of £1, I think. Yeah.
Ouch.
Unless you go to Waitrose or somewhere.
How much is a can of Coke? I know you like your Coke. How much is a can of Coke?
It's about, a can of Coke is about £1 something. Yeah. £1.20.
Right. Oh, okay. I think it was about 60 pence when I left. So.
Yeah, it's gone up considerably. And then a bottle of Coke is about £1.50.
Right. Right,
They're
well,
like
the
between
500 ml jobbies.
yeah. Oh no, like one of the little ones.
Oh, the stubby ones.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. People in the comments can share their experiences of supermarket shopping as well.
Yeah, tell us, like, what's the regular thing that you buy, and it's just gone up shockingly over the last few
There's many
years.
things that like used to be like under £1 that are now much more than £1. That it like there's like little like sweet pouches that you can get. Those are like £1.50.
Right. Okay.
So,
So has your shopping habits changed over the last couple of years? Because they talk about inflation, core inflation,
yeah.
but they a lot less is talked about is the supermarket inflation, the inflation that you actually feel in the shops. I know.
Yeah.
Oh, who's that? Who's that? That cook that deals with cheap food.
Jamie Oliver.
No, no, not.
Um,
She's non-binary. He's non-binary. She's not. They are not non-binary. And she has a.
I know. I know who you mean.
Quite a famous left
Jack
wing.
Monroe.
Jack Monroe. There we go.
Yeah,
Because I know that she talks about it quite
yeah.
a lot, and she's like, well, they say inflation is 11%, but some of these items I'm paying are between 20 and 30% more expensive. So why is nobody talking about that?
Yeah.
So
she says a lot of really intelligent, sensible things. So yeah.
Has your shopping habits changed?
I think so. I'm much more aware of like how much things cost now, whereas before, like I used to just take things off the shelf without really thinking about how much it was. But now I'm like, oh my god, that's like £5, whereas before it was like £3. And I'm much more sort of cautious with, should I actually buy this, or like do I save my money a little bit? So yeah, I mean I'm in a sort of, I'm not in like a really terrible situation where I have to think about that a lot. But I'm much more aware of like how much things are costing and like what prices are on the shelves. And I think about it a lot. I'm much more savvy than I was.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Have you changed any brands? Like before you might have got Hovis bread, whereas now you get own brand bread. Before you had Heinz beans, now you have own brand beans. Like, is there anything like that changed for you personally?
Not particularly, because I always tend to.
You're rich then, aren't you? That's what it is. That's what you're tiptoeing around is.
Not really, no. Because I always tend to just like shop mid-range, or like if I know it's still like okay, then I'll easily get like own brand cereal.
Right.
Because it doesn't make any difference. Like a lot of things, like there are a lot of programs, like food programs, that all say, you can just as easily, have the own brand products. I mean, I sound so middle class saying this. I'm really aware of that, but like, oh, you can just as easily like have like an own brand product, and it like is just as decent as like a top of the shelf product, and like most people probably wouldn't taste the difference. And I have like programs like
I'm sorry, but no, I disagree with that with particular things, right?
There are particular things
when it comes to beans, there's nothing like Heinz. I'm sorry, there are nothing like Heinz.
But like
always
I
Heinz.
like having occasionally I'll have like instant noodles, and they'll always have to be like the Bachelor's super noodles. I won't have any different.
If you like instant noodles, right? They have noodles for days in Korea.
Yeah, I bet they do.
Yeah, so the Korean noodles, they're pretty much of a muchness, but they'll be about 15, 20, 30 per shelf. So times that by 4. Yeah, different types. And then if you go to like an Asia Mart, I've got one just on the corner here actually, which is really, really good. they have like noodles from Vietnam and noodles from Thailand, which are just completely different. Like, and they are awesome. They are super
But like,
awesome.
yeah, like you said, like I think Swiss says in the comments as well, like there's always like specific brands that you go for over other stuff that you know is just better. So like Swiss says, like he'll always go with Heinz ketchup because that's
exactly right. Same here. Same here. If I can find Heinz in Korea, I will always buy Heinz.
And the
like
same with
HP brown sauce.
Yeah,
HP is the best, right? It just is.
Yeah, and the same thing with like, I know it's really bad for you, but like Coca-Cola, it won't be like the, you know, like 17% less fat Coca-Cola, Diet Cola.
I know. Well, they made that. This is before your time, right? But you might have heard of it, like on one of those shows, like worst business decisions ever, right? Things. But in the 80s, Coca-Cola tried to change their formula, right? And people went absolutely batshit over it. Absolutely. Like there's even this pop group that released a song like "Change It Back," like because it was in the news and everything. Like and people were going mad about Coca-Cola.
Well, because it didn't taste as good.
Because it didn't taste the same, right? So like when I heard about the sugar tax, because this is what it's all about, right? What they did is a lot of the brands changed their formula, right? So Fanta is now got less sugar in it.
Quite a lot of E numbers in.
But that's why, like, if you got a can of Coke and a can of Fanta, the can of Coke is more expensive because they've got that sugar tax. So they're like, nope, we're not changing the formula. And that's, I suppose, why they brought out Coke Zero as well.
Yeah,
because you got Diet Coke, Coke Zero, and Coca-Cola, right? Is that three?
I think there's another one that's got like a green label that is like Coke Earth. Hang on.
Does it come in a recyclable carton or something?
I don't know. Coke green bottle. Green Diet Sublime. Oh, I don't know. Oh, Coca-Cola Life. Coke Life. That's what it is.
Okay.
I don't know how it is any different.
Cameron makes an interesting point.
Quite a lot.
Yeah, I know. He said, strangely enough, alcohol in supermarkets is around the same, right? Now, that's because it's something that affects politicians as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. Icky-doke. I was going to also just add on, before we move on to the next one, that Cocoa Pops in like, I think this was like the late 90s, tried to do a name change where they changed their name to Choco Krispies.
Yes, I remember that.
And they had to subsequently change their name back because there was such a backlash, which is hilarious thinking about it. Because they didn't change the taste or anything; they just changed the name.
Changed the name, yeah.
But that's just something that I remember.
Yeah, you can destroy the NHS, destroy the police service, just don't fuck with my breakfast cereal. Right?
Yeah. So anyway, we might as well move on from this one because we're sort of moving quite neatly on.
Rachel Reeves, is it next?
No. I found this article of the COVID scrapped contracts of like,
oh my God,
unusable PPE that they've just written off. So like, if we're going to talk about like how do we fix broken Britain, there's quite a lot of money when they say that we couldn't possibly because like there's not enough money and we can't like do a wealth tax, but we can just cut more and do tax cuts, and there's no money to like put into public services. Well, like look at all this wastage. So I think I pulled up an article from the British Medical Journal, and this is from February of last year. And it's all about the COVID-19 government writes off £10 billion of unusable overpriced PPE, which is just disgusting. If you think about the cost of living and everything that is happening like over the past year or so, and it's like, oh, we've got no money. You just written off like billions and billions of pounds.
How much would it cost to end the 2-child support?
I know, that's the thing.
Cap.
That's the
it's
thing.
It's like 1.2 billion or something like that, and it'll lift
so
500,000 children out of poverty overnight. Like, it's just like,
it's mad.
Yeah.
So I'll just quickly go through this one. So the government has written off almost £10 billion of spending on personal protective equipment that was either unusable, above market price, or was not delivered. Accounts show the Department of Health Social Care annual report for 2021 show that 8.7 billion worth of PPE purchased early in the pandemic was written off. This included 673 million for defective PPE not suitable for any use, 2.6 billion for items not suitable for NHS use, 4.7 billion from paying inflated prices because of global demand, and 750 million for excess inventory that passed its expiry date and held for resale of donation. The department also purchased an additional 1.2 billion of PPE that had not been delivered as of 31st of March 21, which it was committed to buying, the accounts show. So Gareth Davis, the head of the National Audit Office, described delivering the department accounts as challenging and gave them only qualified approval. Government has faced much criticism for the way it has handled procurement during the pandemic, including its establishment of a high-priority VIP lane through which its potential PPE suppliers referred by MPs, ministers or civil servants could gain quicker access to contracts, a process that was later ruled unlawful by a High Court judge. Davis said that the health department had rapidly increased its risk appetite and adapted its normal processes in response to COVID-19, was not able adequately to manage some of the elevated risks, resulting in significant losses for the taxpayer and leaving the department open to the risk of fraud. So,
and like you look at the government's response to this, and like whenever Rishi Sunak is questioned about it, it's always like he never commits to investigating it. He's more willing to write it off, and I think it's because the Tory party's grubby mitts are all over this scandal, right? Like what happened to Michelle Moaning?
She just got off scot-free.
Like,
she's not being investigated at all. She's on a yacht somewhere.
The fuck! I've heard that she hasn't even shown up to the Lords.
No.
Since that scandal broke, she's not even doing her job.
No. Like, no. Exactly. But it just speaks of like the corruption and the greed that is so rife in like the center of our government, where like there's no questions asked. Like it's, when things are deemed to be unlawful by the Supreme Court, it can get investigated, and you can say, oh, that's illegal, you weren't allowed to do that. But is there anyone being held to account for that? Is anyone arrested? Is anyone fined? Is anyone suspended from their job? Like maybe they're suspended for like a month or two, but then they just get back to walk back in. And it's like, this is such a big amount of money, like £10 billion. You could spend that on quite a lot of policies that would help, bring people out of poverty. But again, like this is all like a choice. They didn't have to write that off. They could force those companies to pay it back. But no, not gonna, because like I want to keep my friends in good places.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there is a word for this. There's a word for it. It begins with I was going to say it begins with C. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's corruption. I mean, it's pretty. Like when you look back at the 80s and 90s, I mean, there is some disagreement or some discussion with old people like me, right?
Mhm.
And whether we discuss whether the Tories now are worse than the Tories then. I mean, this bunch of Tories are, they've been
Awful.
scraping
Yeah.
the barrel a bit, right? They are
Mm.
pretty bad. But I mean, this level of corruption, and I think that they were just as bad in some ways in the 80s and 90s, except one thing that's changed, and that is our access to information.
Mm.
Right, our ability to access information has changed. We have, the world at our fingertips, as it were, whereas we didn't have that back in the 80s and 90s. So,
Yeah.
it's is it that the corruption has changed, or is it just the information that we're getting has
I
changed? And
think
I,
it's
and
a
I
mix
think
of.
there could be, it's a bit of both, I think.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
And also, I was just going to say, just the level of them not sort of checking themselves,
right.
because they say there were a lot of interviews that like Matt Hancock did where he
Mm,
was asked like, oh, in retrospect, what do you make of like these PPE contracts and
mm,
the level of like alleged fraud that you might have been
mhm,
committed and the amounts of money and the
mm,
VIP lanes that you allowed, etc. Like, do
right.
you think that was like okay at the time? And like, do you look back and think perhaps we could have done it a bit more? You could have been a bit more diligent and like checked these things out. And he's like, no, whatever we did, like it was a global pandemic and it was an emergency, so we had
Mm.
to like think fast and get these materials really, really quickly. And I think that we did what was necessary at the time.
But there were people contacting the government and saying, look,
Yeah,
we have a PPE
actual
factory
health
ready to go.
professionals. Yeah,
Actual PPE. We have
yeah,
it ready to go. Just let us know
mm,
and we'll sell it at cost
yeah,
to you. Right.
yeah.
And like,
I mean, they had the NHS was there, probably telling them like, yeah, we've got these resources, like
uh,
we'll give them to you, and like if you get us to manufacture them, then we will.
yeah,
But no, they
absolutely.
just like they got like what actually happened was like these shell companies just suddenly appeared out of thin air, and they just applied on like the government website for like a contract, and then lo and behold ended up getting so like all this money that
Mm,
then ended up being like undeliverable because it was like a load of rubbish like masks and stuff that couldn't be used. Then they
mm,
got the money anyway,
mm,
and it's all sat in like some warehouse
mm.
wherever, like gathering dust, probably going to be incinerated. And
Right.
it's just like the wastage of that. That's like
The wastage is
millions and
incredible.
billions of
Mm,
pounds that you've just thrown into the bin for what? Like, oh, it's an emergency and we needed to like, but when normal businesses, when they want to reach out and like have a new contract with something to get a job done,
right.
they'll have like they'll they'll have what's it called? They'll like get them to sort of compete with each other to see like who's the best one that can get the
Yeah,
job
they put in bids,
done.
right? They bid for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And like who's like the most professional, so that we know that it will be done competently, and then you
Right.
do it like that.
Mm,
So and I feel like no, they just let these people in without because I know them from my days at Eton.
yeah,
So
and it needs to be totally transparent. The thing is that is such a lack of transparency when it comes to
yeah,
these procurements. Whether Matt Hancock's mate that runs a pub down the road, right? For instance,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like how
There's
he's
conflict of
qualified
interest as
because.
well. Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. It's just
but yeah, Cameron's here. Hi, Cameron.
Oh, hello, hello.
Oh,
Lulu. Um, yeah, like I said, it's a conflict of interest, and it's just
mm,
the fact that like it's just so brazen and like it's like common knowledge that a lot of these contracts were awarded to like affiliates of the Conservative Party or like donors of the
right.
party or like is the husband or wife or like friend or associate of somebody who works in this department. It's like guys, are we
Yeah.
going to do something about this? Or, oh no,
Right.
we'll just write it off. It's fine.
Oh,
Jesus.
sickening. It's
Yeah.
sickening. It's sickening.
And the sooner we get this lot out, the better. Because, yeah.
Well, like, I don't, to be honest, I don't see Richie Sunak as a legitimate prime minister, to be honest.
Well, he isn't really, is he? Because he's not been elected.
He has zero mandate. He
Mhm.
doesn't even have a mandate from his own party,
Yeah.
right?
And he's
So-
out of touch. He's rich as creases and doesn't really care.
Yeah,
Wow, why?
I think he's probably good at his job, right? As a bean counter,
Politician. Yeah.
not as a politician. No. I mean,
He says the right
he
thing.
resents the public. He literally resents the public. So
Well, I mean, I just meant in that he talks the talk and says what he needs to say,
right.
in order to like get off the hook about something. But yeah, it's like, wow, you know, I've set out my pledges and I plan to meet these targets, and we're going to stop the votes and we're going to reduce inflation, and that's what I plan to do. And it's like, that's the answer to every single question that he's given. Stop the votes. I pledge to stop the votes. We're going to stop the votes. That's what I plan to do. And it's like a reiteration of like that, you know.
Well,
sort of,
that's because I don't believe in anything other than their own political power.
Right.
You know, if you listen to Sunak,
It's power. It's power for the sake of having power, which
Yeah,
is like the worst thing ever. Like,
I mean, his rhetoric is all about trying to whip up his voter base. Basically.
yeah.
I don't think it's going to
Diminishing
work for him.
every day.
I like to call him prime technocrat because that's how I think of him.
right. I mean, it goes. I mean, this goes right back to David Cameron, right? When David Cameron was asked, "Why do you want to be prime minister?" and his answer was, "Because I think I'll be good at it." Right? I mean, that is not a reason. I'm sorry. Whichever way you cut it, that is not a reason.
No.
Right? Well, I suppose it is a reason in his eyes, but it's a pretty piss poor fucking reason, that's for sure.
But I feel like the reason why like people want to go into like at least I think Theresa May was interviewed and was asked this sort of question the other day where she said something like she was speaking to like a sort of much lower down sort of advisor person in Parliament, and she's like, oh, why did you want to work in Parliament and do that? And like her answer was like, oh, because I want to get into the cabinet one day. And she was like, oh, well, that's not the point of this job. It's like, well, at least you're being honest. Like,
right.
You know, the idea of going into Parliament and working as a MP or a minister is to serve the public and be their sort of constituency representative,
right,
and at least a little bit improve their like state of living.
Right.
I mean, that's how it should start anyway. And the reason why you're promoted into like a ministerial job or a cabinet role is because you're good at it. You prove to be good at your job. Whereas that's not, I don't feel like that's the case anymore. Certainly not with people like Boris Johnson.
No, right.
Just feel like they're entitled to be prime minister because they think they should be.
John Cooper made a comment here. He said, funny enough, Swiss TDLR has done a too long didn't read has done a video explaining he's the most right-wing PM since Thatcher, despite his image of a moderate. Yes, I agree with that. There is something deeply authoritarian about Sunak, and his politics are rotten to the core. And you can see that by the people he appoints around him, right? You judge a prime minister by their cabinet usually, and the decisions that they make together. Like Suella Braverman, she is. I'm sorry, but she is a witch, right?
She's just nasty. Like just these nasty people. Just
Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, that's
right?
another one. Therese
Absolutely.
Coffey, another one.
Therese Coffey, yeah. These
She's
are
horrible.
disgusting human
Yeah.
beings, right?
Mm.
And I think the reason why he appointed these people, I mean, some of them are absolutely drenched in scandal, such as Suella Braverman, because they reflect his policies, right?
Mm.
And that's what you do. Like, your cabinet reflects you as a prime minister and the policies you uphold. And I think that, yes, he is deeply right wing and he is deeply authoritarian. Sorry, Cameron. Yeah, I did cut you off there.
I don't.
Do you agree?
No. I don't think Sunak actually believes in anything solid. I think he pursues what makes him popular amongst his voters. I don't think he has a solid set of political beliefs. I don't think
I disagree with that. I disagree with that, right? Because I mean, we brushed over this at the beginning. Like, he says, you know, his number one priority is stopping the boats because it's a priority for the British people. This guy has never read a poll. In that case, if he thinks it's a priority, because it's not a priority. I'm sorry,
not a priority of mine. I'm really not.
No, like if you look at the pollings, and they suggest that maybe on some of the most right wing of polls, then maybe it breaks into the top 3, maybe, but it's not a priority. Definitely not a priority. Yeah, it's his priority.
Yeah,
right?
I think he just, like, a lot of them like to just gaslight and say, this is what the public wants us to be doing. When actually, like, if you actually looked at the polls, I mean, a lot of people wouldn't. Like, it's a lot more nuanced than just, yes, I think that we should just all stop the boats. I'm just looking at, like,
I don't think he actually cares about stopping the votes or what he says. If you look at statistics of immigration,
I think it's a tool. It's a tool for him to use. I think
that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at immigration, right, on the Rishi Sunak, it's at record levels. Not just legal immigration, but illegal immigration from so-called child crossing.
It's interesting because I'll just say this quickly because I'm just looking at, this is from the Migration Observatory of the University of Oxford. So they did some research recently. This is June of this year. And they said, our research shows that when set in a wider context of public policy, public policy challenges, the public view stricter border controls to reduce unauthorised immigration as the least important of Rishi Sunak's 5 policy priorities, as it ranks number 11 out of the 12 public policy areas presented to respondents, with reducing inflation and investing more in healthcare ranking as the first and second priorities respectively. The public are split on the contribution that immigration makes to Britain, with roughly a third believing it's good for Britain and a third believing it's bad, and the third expressing a neutral opinion. And these attitudes are generally split across the political spectrum. But 48% of those who voted Labour in 2019 believe that immigration is good or a very good thing. But yeah, there's if you go onto Migration Observatory, they've done like lots of research onto attitudes towards immigration, and they, like, lots of people would probably prefer that immigration is made easier for like refugees who are seeking high skilled jobs, rather than, you know, making it harder and more illegal. So
there we go. My point exactly.
Yeah, there you are.
I don't think he's. But how much is that amongst the voters? I don't. That's what I think he's doing. I think he's targeting conservative voters who on polling are saying that they don't want to vote in the next election. That's what I think he's targeting. I don't think he's targeting the majority of the vote. I think he's targeting specifically from conservative voters that voted conservative in 2019. Who might be more strong about immigration. That's the point.
I think you're right about that. I think that particular segment of the country's demographic is a shrinking one. They're trying so desperately to cling on to that 2019 like red wall voter base that they got as a result of Boris Johnson coming in and saying, like, get Brexit done, etc. That now things are changing and the realities of Brexit are starting to bite a lot more. Polls are changing. We're talking about polls a lot, and now we're seeing more and more that when people are asked, like, do you want to rejoin the EU or do you want to, like, you know, various iterations of being closer aligned to the EU, whether that's single market or customs union membership, more and more people are saying, let's have closer alignment to the EU rather than let's stay out of it, because that's clearly not doing us any good currently.
So
is now
I'm sure
for me to just say a quick hello.
Hello, Swiss. How you doing? Long time no speak.
It's nice to see you. I've been better, to be totally honest. I didn't think I'd make it on today, but I was lying here in bed.
Feeling a bit groggy. You're sounding a bit groggy.
I'm horrible. I've been up and down for the past week, but I really hit a wall last night. But I've been listening to you guys for the past hour, so I thought I'd at least join the stream.
Nice. Yeah.
So I can
Nice
mute.
to have you.
Thank you. I can mute myself when I need to cough my lungs up, and I'll jump in here and there with a few things to say.
Real.
Okay.
Well, we'll move on to talk about Labour now, because I think a few people want to talk about that. But I'm just going to quickly do a tweet doing some shameless promotion. So
mention the EU and Swiss comes. Yeah, nice one, John.
Yeah.
I think like an interesting thought exercise, you know, and I know James O'Brien has this thought exercise. Is what if Rishi Sunak just, because you know they're dying in the polls, right? So he's got nothing to lose. He just comes out and says, "We're going to rejoin the customs union," right?
Yeah.
Because that would solve a lot of Brexit's ills. You know, just a single the customs union. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. And he thinks that might shoot Keir Starmer's fox.
Do you think
who knows?
the thing
It's
is,
a thought experiment.
I think a lot of what Rishi's playbook is, and I think you guys mentioned this earlier anyway, was that there's a lot of pandering to his party's own right wing, and I think that's the sort of thing that would be a big old red flag for them, the customs union thing. But I mean, if you're saying it just in terms of a thought experiment, you know, what if he did it? What effect would it have? I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I'm thinking electorally, at least. I think the Tory party's lost a lot of their. They've lost so many of their voters and their base over the past.
And now they're playing around with dumping the triple lock.
Yeah,
I mean, that is Tory base, right?
That's pensioners. That's like the last line of defence.
All I'd heard of that recently was a newspaper front page that said something like Rishi Sunak says, "Yes, I'll keep the triple lock." So I'm guessing now then that was in response to reports he's ditching it. Then
yeah. Well, I heard it on PMQs, and he didn't say yes, he is dropping it, but he also didn't deny it. So I think him and his policy wonks are entertaining the idea, because it is expensive, and with inflation how high it is, because it's inflation 3%, and what's the third look, and wages, whichever is higher, right? Yeah. With inflation at what 10, well, core inflation is what 5.5%, 6% at the moment. This one policy has become incredibly expensive for him, and he doesn't like the fact that it's really expensive because he's a tight motherfucker. That's why. But you know, he is, at the end of the day, he is a bean counter, right? That's what he does. He likes looking at spreadsheets and counting beans. So for him, it is an expensive policy, but it's their base. It's their base. It's their bread and butter. So
but it's like I think the rationale behind this being sort of starting to be discussed is that we're obviously sort of a year less on the way to a general election happening at some point.
It's
And
January
they're thinking about, like,
2025 is the latest, I think.
what
Yeah.
can we do to, you know, what do people want? What do our voters want from us? I mean, I think they're thinking about doing tax cuts again. That's what they usually do. But you know, how are we going to generate the money for that? We can't do it from cut public spending cuts.
Because there's no cutting.
There's
nothing to cut.
So who do we target now? Oh, we target not the wealthiest. It's always the most vulnerable people. It's the old pensioners. I mean, given that, you know, that in terms of the triple lock, not every pensioner needs to have that, because there are a good few pensioners that are quite well off already, like have paid their mortgages off, you know, are quite happy, you know, where they are with their assets, thanks. But yes, they need something to fund their tax cuts, because that's pretty much all they have. And it's like, oh, this our triple lock pension policy, which we've had for 13 years, which we've never, you know, we've always dangled like a carrot and stick in front of, you know, our pensioner voter base.
Carrot for the rich, stick for the poor.
Yeah.
Carrot for the rich.
So I don't know how well that's going to serve them, because, like, what else do they have apart from?
I think it's.
They can't carry on with that. There's just like, that's just going to really dwindle, and people will stop caring about that.
There's not a lot of political capital to be made there.
No.
I mean, it's a departure from the Liz Truss school of economics, which is we'll pay for tax cuts by growing the economy.
Like, it's just like stupid. Like, they keep going on about, like, let's grow the economy by tax cuts. Like, if you keep giving money to, like, already wealthy people, like, they're going to put that in the Cayman Islands and just sit on it and have that in, like, a savings account that they don't pay tax for. And they think, oh, well, that will eventually, like, feed back down to, you know, poorer people.
Trickle-down economics is nonsense. It always has been nonsense.
And it doesn't happen, because rich people, once they've got enough assets and wealth, they stop spending money on things. Yes, they may invest it into, like, businesses and companies and, like, shell companies that are offshore in a different country, so therefore they don't have to pay tax. Like, a lot of the media, the newspaper bosses, like the Rothermeres and, like, Murdoch, they don't pay tax because, you know, their businesses are, like, in other countries, so they don't pay tax in this country. So the idea that it's all, like, trickle down is just bollocks, because you know, it doesn't work like that. If you just keep incentivizing money to very rich people who already have wealth, you know, nothing will happen.
It's nonsense. You look at
getting richer and the poor will get poorer.
You look at the rate of inequality in the 1970s, right? And then you compare it to now, right? Inequality has grown humongously, right? There are more billionaires in the UK now than there ever was.
Yeah.
Right. Now you look at what happened in between. What happened in the 80s was this idea of trickle-down economics, Reaganomics, or Thatcherite economics, right? And that was the start of it. And that's been pretty much the playbook ever since. I mean, Blair should have done something to change it, but he didn't. You know, I mean, on his own words, he wanted to build on what Thatcher created, and Thatcher still sees Tony Blair, or did see Tony Blair, as her greatest achievement, right? Because it means that they spoke about the economy on Thatcherite terms, like there was nothing else.
Right,
there was no other. Yeah, sorry, Cameron, I'm done anyway. Yeah, mate.
Yeah, I have to go. I hope we save a bit longer. But yeah, I have to go. So I'll probably in the side chat.
Usually.
Nice one, Cam.
Because I'll be on both. So.
See you later.
Nice to share a stream with you, as brief as it may have been. Earlier on, I think you guys were talking about voters' priorities. I think it's when you were discussing the small boat crossings.
Yeah.
Right.
Am I right in saying that most polling on what issue matters most to people, it's generally the cost of living. That's
Yeah.
the one that comes
Yeah.
top right now, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking when you're talking about the triple lock, and obviously you're absolutely right that there are people that a pension that keeps up with inflation is absolutely going to benefit who need that, and then obviously yes, there are going to be wealthier pensioners who could easily get by without an increase of that amount. Would a solution perhaps be like a means tested?
I knew you were going to say that. I
Yeah.
nearly beat you to it. Then I was going
Did
to say,
ya?
well, you
Did
could means test it, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the problem with means testing is expensive. Okay, to have a team, the administration costs of means testing is expensive, and so I'm sure again, Rishi Sunak and his policy wonks. You know, as I said, when in dealing with the public and public good, I think he's really, really terrible. But I think he's really good, like in counting. So he's said this, and someone brought up, why don't we means test it? And they've done the math and gone, well, okay, this is how much it costs to means test. This is how long it'll take. This is the amount of people that we need to do that. And this is the administrative costs to carry this out. So means testing as a thing is expensive.
I can understand what you're saying there. There's like a whole administrative department that you'd need to sort of look over that kind of stuff, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
I guess the question being then, I don't know. I don't want to pluck a number out of the air, but say they put an estimate of how much this department would cost to have all the people staffing it and doing the means testing and all the rest of it, and then they make an estimate of how much money they would be saving via the people no longer receiving this additional pension. If by a decent enough amount you're gaining more money than you're spending in that regard, then at least that surplus that you've got can then be pushed towards other things,
but
whether it's the lower end of the pile or not.
Yeah.
That's the balance that they have to strike, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
I think somebody somewhere's probably made that calculation. And
admittedly, I'm talking about that all in the abstract, so it's easy enough to say, oh yeah, 1 + 1 is 2, but it's a different story in real life.
So you know the arguments with UBI, right? Universal Basic Income, and people saying, well, actually, if you look at the welfare bill now, and if you got rid of all of universal credit and all of that, tax credits and all of that, right, and you replace it with the UBI, a lot of that saving is made because of the sheer effort it takes to income assess everybody, because it's universal. Everybody gets it, right? I mean, the government spends an awful lot of money on welfare, right? But it also spends a lot of money on assessing people for welfare.
But it's much like the DWP in that regard, though, isn't it? Because I was gonna ask. I mean, I may be making this up, or I may have gotten this from somewhere. But wasn't like something like universal credit? Wasn't that like means tested? Don't they means test?
Yes, they do.
For benefits.
Well, yeah, that's in Duncan Smith's baby, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So rather than giving benefits on a weekly basis, they'll change it to monthly, and then it prepared people for work, because most people get paid on a monthly basis.
Yeah, well, they do that with people who are like disabled. Like, can you walk
PPI.
like 10 paces across?
Right.
I spent this was going back a few years. It was near the beginning of the pandemic, but I spent the better part of a year having universal credit.
Right.
And what I remember of using that system is that they'd calculate the amount you'd get on a sort of like a rolling basis based on how much income you may have had the month before. So it would be prone to change. I think I'm remembering this correctly, but it would be prone to change up and down a little bit depending what your other sources.
So it was a consistent means testing on a monthly basis.
Yeah,
rather than getting assessed once and then you have 6 months and then you get assessed again.
I believe so. Now, obviously, I know that it's a big tent that's got all kinds of different benefits under it, isn't it? So I was obviously only having access to a certain slice of that pie. But from what I remember, it was prone to change depending on what my earnings were.
Like unemployment.
That process that you're going through, that process is not cheap.
Mm. Just think of all the people they have to employ at the job centre for that.
Yeah. And that's at the bottom level,
Yeah.
right?
Hey, you know all these they keep bigging up the AI is going to come along and revolutionize everything. That could be a trick over the next few years. Try and get some computer algorithm to work it out and just have
they use it quite a lot in law and news agencies and things like that. Just if you've got like just huge amounts of data, right?
Like Cambridge Analytica, that sort of thing.
Yeah, like they just analyze huge amounts of data at once, right?
Yeah.
And where it take like 1,000 people 100 days, it takes one computer algorithm a couple of hours. So
yeah. But if we're talking about because we're talking generally about how we could save money and move that money across for other things that could benefit people living in this country. I know that because we're going to move on. We will move on at some point to talk
to
about
Labour. Yeah, we got to move on to that. I mean, there's definitely a segue to Rachel Reeves.
Yeah, because I know that Labour have been talking about they're going to scrap the whole hotel scheme for putting refugees into hotels because that is costing so much money.
Oh my God, that is
just
incredible.
people sat in hotels doing nothing.
Yeah, but that's because they cut the Department of Civil Servants. It's like 5 people processing like millions of refugee applications.
Yeah, or like the Home Office and like the civil service can't deal with. Like there's such a backlog, just as there's backlogs for most other things in this country that it's not getting dealt with. People's like asylum claims aren't being dealt with nearly quick enough. So these people are just like I know that media uses the word languishing a lot, which is not a nice word to use because it suggests
it's not.
It's a very suggestible word. But yeah,
I like to say suffering.
Suffering
right
in the hotels. Not being able to
God, I'd hate to live in a Forte Post house. You ever been to one of those places?
Which one?
Forte Post house. Like, one of those motorway side motels filled with sales reps and horrible breakfasts in the morning and they're not great.
But admittedly, just scrapping that whole hotel scheme would be a good idea. Like if they actually, got their fingers out their asses and actually decided that that's something.
Okay. Now I think that this is a good idea, but this is the problem with a lot of the policies that Labour is coming out with. What are you going to do to replace it? Okay, that there is a process here, right? Okay, so you're just gonna end the hotel thing? Okay, great. Then what do you do? Do you expand the civil service again? So there's a cost.
You need to find a way to decrease the backlog of, people applying. So you maybe need to employ more civil servants to be able to do that.
Am I right that another plank of this Labour proposal on immigration, in regards to the boat crossings at least, is that they wanted to get some kind of a deal going with the EU where, I think I'm right in saying that we would be able to send people who arrived on boats back to France. However,
the right to return.
Yeah. However, we'd also agree to take a quota of the immigrants who arrive within the EU to the UK. So
number. It's not the 100,000 that's being bandied about. I don't think.
I'm not sure. I'd need to look at the details of it, but I think on the face of it, it's basically whatever we've got going on with that situation. Maybe the numbers themselves wouldn't change that much, but it would be a much more managed situation. It would no longer be people arriving and then going, right, who are you? Do you have any documents? Where are we going to put you? It would be more, right, you've arrived. If you haven't arrived here properly, you go back to France. However, we will be taking in people from the EU otherwise.
But there are a lot of
ongoing negotiation with
there are a lot of unknowns in this discussion, and we all know that France can be a bit prickly when it comes to refugees and taking them or sending them or whatever. That they are just generally prickly when it comes to this issue, and our exit from the EU just made things worse. And I know Macron has no great love for this for the government. Whether Starmer will be any different, I don't know. Starmer's government will be different. Whether it be
I
more
think
more willing to negotiate.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Just quickly,
No,
I think Truss really helped with that, didn't she? Where I think in the leadership campaign they said, "Oh, what do you think of Macron? Is he an ally?" And she said, "The jury's out," or something.
Oh yes, she did. Yeah.
Despite what your private feelings may be, there's certain things you're not supposed to say the quiet parts out loud.
Oh, I'm not sure. Like, why would you say that? For God's sake, woman.
Well, she was never the sharpest tool in the box, was she?
No.
So
sadly, she did not. Anyway, we'll move on to Rachel Reeves because I've got a clip of her on LBC. Because so back to what we were originally discussing about how we're gonna get out of this sort of this death spiral of like everything's going to shit, and how do we pay to get out of it, sort of thing. And what would Labour do? What would they probably not do? What they say they're going to do, and they'll probably U-turn again on it next week. But yeah, I just want to show you. There's like she was on like Cross Questions last week with Ian Dale, and it's quite funny because I don't know if you've seen this clip where somebody basically quotes something that she said previously back at her, and she didn't realise it was her own quote. It's quite funny. So yeah, I'll share that with you now.
Roll the film.
So you just know. Here she is. So
a quote here from a pretty prominent economist, and they say that Labour needs to provide an alternative to aggressive policies being prioritised by the Conservatives. The banks and those earning more than £100,000 could quite easily contribute a little more, and unless they do, inequality and poverty will inevitably soar in the months and years ahead. Do you agree with that statement?
The way that I believe that you can reduce inequality, reduce poverty, and actually also improve the living standards of ordinary working people, not in poverty, but struggling to get by, is through growing the economy.
You know, the economist that she quoted, that was actually you.
Well, look, I mean, I want to do poverty and inequality. I wouldn't go into politics. But how do you do that? What are the practical things that we can do?
Well, your suggestion in that quote was to tax the banks more and those earning more than £100,000 more, but you've gone back on that.
Well, look, the way that I think that we can lift people out of poverty and reduce inequality, as I say, is to get the economy growing.
Oh, okay.
That's the person that asked that question is actually a political twitcher, and I've forgotten her name.
Isn't it Helen? Helena? Something like that. She's got I think she's got a good YouTube channel.
She's got more followers on Twitch than she has on YouTube. YouTube was kind of a second thing. But anyway,
I've got to say,
I digress.
Twitcher is a term I've not come across until now. That's an interesting one hearing for the first time. A political twitcher.
Yeah,
sounds
like
she goes easily bothered.
Twitchers are bird watchers, aren't they?
Well, Twitch, isn't it? So she goes on Twitch and she does live videos. But anyway, this is the key question. I've been shouting this from the rooftops for months. All right, what we're going to do to lift people out of poverty is to grow the economy. Yes.
How do you do that?
How? How are you going to grow the economy?
I remember, I'm sure. I'm so sure. I have to hope against hope this, because otherwise there's just no hope for anything. But you just have to think that these people like Rachel Reeves, please have some sort of principle, because you said this previously, but now you're saying something different. So you must still believe on some level that thing that you said previously about taxing the wealthy. You must still think that, because you that's still in your head. But now you've been forced to say something slightly different because someone's whispered in your ear to not frighten the horses.
I mean, growing the economy is a given in a way. There's no government that would come to power that would say, "No, you know what? We want to shrink the economy. That's what we're going to try and do. We're going to decrease the size of it." So
there is a problem here. There is a problem. Sorry to cut you off, Switch, but there is a huge problem that Rachel Reeves seems not to be calculating, right? And that is that the Bank of England is trying to engineer a recession. The Bank of England thinks that the labour market is running too hot right now, right? They are trying, by raising interest rates, to engineer a recession. If you listen to the chairman of the Bank of England, he's always, yes, we need it to be painful for a while, and that will bring down inflation, but it'll also increase unemployment, right? So they are trying to engineer a recession, right? And the thing is, this doesn't seem to come into Rachel Reed's thinking, right? Why is she not saying, how are you going to reverse a recession that is out of your control? Because what they did is, as you know, they decoupled the Bank of England from government, right? So it acts independently and is not subject to political interference. So this is something out of her control. And if she is seen to interfere with the Bank of England, then that'll be seen as an ideological move, which will be plastered all over the right wing, right? Press. Right, and they don't want that, because it's they don't have the political capital yet to try anything like that. Yeah. So when you got two forces moving in opposite directions, there's nothing you can do about it. The only way that she can grow the economy is by investment. But they are unwilling to invest.
I was going to bring this up when we're looking at sort of the growth of the economy, short term versus long term,
right?
Because an inflationary recession that would obviously be a relatively short term thing in the grand scheme of things. You know, it would be in response to Bank of England doing what they're doing with the interest rates to combat inflation. Right. We can assume, and we can certainly hope that, say in 5 years' time, we're not facing anywhere near the same sorts of conditions inflation-wise as we are now.
I believe some of the inflationary forces that we're suffering will still be present, though, such as Brexit will still be ever present, because that is one of the inflationary forces that we have. Hopefully, the war in Ukraine will be over by then, and of course, we'll be like all the COVID hangover will be gone by then. As well.
I was leading on to the point you were making anyway, where you were talking about. Excuse me. Where you were talking about investment. Because what I meant was, the situation we're in now, converging factors, right? You want to say Brexit, you want to say Ukraine war, you want to say all of the quantitative easing of the past 10, 15 years or whatever. It's all affecting us. But in theory, at least, down the line, it won't be the same combination of forces acting on us in the same way. So it may well be, through the choices of the Bank of England, they do cause a recession via trying to combat inflation, but I'd hope that would be something in the scale of only affecting us for a few years, whereas whatever plan any government needs to lay out for quote unquote growing the economy, that has to be longer term. It has to be looking past the immediate, do we grow, do we shrink, Bank of England and inflation, etc. So on to what you were saying, investment. That's what I'm going to be interested to see then. What levels of investment they're looking at. I think when Labour's outlined what their spending is going to be, I think they've said that they don't want to borrow anymore for what's called day-to-day spending, but they would borrow more in order to invest. So I'm assuming that's things like travel infrastructure, buildings, stuff along those lines.
Because the thing is, Labour are really not saying very much at the moment, which is understandable, because they don't want to be seen to say something and then get attacked too early on by the right wing press for being too radical.
They're closing opening two revenue streams, aren't they? So they're closing the non-dom status, and they are ending the charitable status of fee-paying schools.
Private schools,
right? So those two revenue streams they're going to be getting. But whenever you see them talk about it, these two revenue streams are doing a lot of heavy lifting. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Oh yeah,
they are doing a lot of heavy lifting. So Yeah, it is going to be interesting to see what happens when we get closer to the the election.
Oh yes.
So
It's just
yeah.
it's frustrating though, because whenever they talk about or how you're gonna raise this revenue to pay for whatever it is you want to do, because obviously you're gonna have to invest, because this country's like a busted flush and is like broken to shit. So you're gonna have to do something because people are crying out for change. And they say, this is why I get so frustrated, because there's like a litany of things that Keir Starmer has said that they've gone back on and done U-turns on. So like they're not going to do a wealth tax anymore on anyone earning above £100,000. But I reckon that when they get if and when they get into government, they're going to be forced into doing things that they said that they weren't going to do, but then will have to do in order to try and raise money. Because what else are you going to do? Like, where else are you going to get that money from, apart from the things you've already mentioned, which are like just little sort of tidbits of revenue? Like, easily a wealth tax would help you immensely pay for things, like the 2-child benefit cap, for example. That would pay for that easily.
That was such an easy win for Keir Starmer. I mean, why didn't you say yes? We'll end it. It will cost 1.2 billion, which is a drop in the ocean when you're looking at an economy the size of the UK's.
Yeah,
right. It's such an easy win, and I don't know why he didn't do it.
There's just so many open goals for them to score, like easy wins. It's like, wealth tax. We're gonna tax these people like 20%, or we're gonna raise corporation tax, and that's gonna pay for this policy. Easy wins. They're like, oh no, I'm too frightened. I don't want to scare the rich people.
The thing is, I'd not ever thought that Starmer was going to be the full red-blooded Corbyn when it came to
right. Of course, yeah. I mean, that was understandable.
Goes
without saying. Yeah.
But obviously, in the time since, it has been quite pronounced just how much distance he's moved Labour away from where it was under Corbyn. He's done it more so than I'd expected he would have done when he first became the leader.
He's been a lot more authoritarian than I thought he would be.
Oh, big time. I mean, if Corbyn had tried a few of the things that he's tried while he's been leader in terms of cracking down on the other wing of the party, then Stalinist purge, anybody?
Yeah, right.
Right. But here's the thing. I think one of you guys mentioned the phrase "spooking the horses" earlier. And I can totally understand the roadmap that he's got Labour on, which is they want to go for that middle England voter, the one that maybe more often than not will vote Tory, but at times can be open to voting Labour. Probably did at least a couple times in the new Labour years, 97, 2001, maybe that kind of thing. They're obviously doing their best to offer the most, fiscally responsible, vanilla form of Labour government they possibly can to try and get them over the line into power. And then this next point, I'll just say quickly, because you had a comment from Bandman Talks that says, "What's your thoughts on Labour moving away from more socialist policy to win the election, then moving close once in power?" That is the key. That's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's once they make it into power, what do they then do with it?
I think that's what everyone thinks, but doesn't want to say.
Yeah.
No, I don't think they will. Right, I'll come out and say I don't think they will. And the reason why I say that is if you look at his current shadow cabinet, right, that's what is going to be in the first year or two if they get into power, right? So if they get a clear majority, I'm not sure the arithmetic is there yet. But if they do get into power, will he move? Will he edge more to the left, or will they stay where he is? If you look at his current shadow cabinet, I don't think so. These are all from a certain wing of the party. They're all Blair.
What about Angela Rayner, I'd say?
But Angela, I think if he could have replaced Angela Rayner, he would have done. But he can't because she's in an elected position.
She's in an elected position, and I think she's. It feels a bit reductionist to say it, but I think she also serves as sort of like the token working party.
I think that as well.
At the top of the party as well.
I think she's the left. She's the sweetener for the left.
She's Starmer's Prescott, basically. But I mean, what I can say, what I can say with
She did quite a good speech to the TUC this week.
She did.
before that.
She did. But if you look at Mick Glitch's reaction to that speech, he was just kind of like, well, we've heard it all before. Like, it was just like, yeah, it was good. You know, she speaks a good game, but what are they going to do about it? Right. And he was basically not commenting. We'll see what happens if they do make actions, because the shadow cabinet have made so many U-turns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Over
think
the past couple of years,
if he ends up getting rid of Angela Rayner at the very last minute, I will be really.
He can't.
Like, no.
He can't. He
was elected on the same mandate he was. Wasn't he? It was party members. If I can make
it's the only position he can't get rid of. And I swear, in the last reshuffle, if he could have got rid of her, he would have, but he couldn't, so he didn't.
I want to wait. Thank you. Yeah, just one comment quickly, just again on this question of the direction of a Labour government. I think the one thing that I can say with certainty, which I don't have any doubt about, is that I think a Labour government under Starmer would probably at least be a few inches more social democratic at the very least than the Tories. Socialist probably isn't the word you want to bring into it, but I think I think if you put the two of them together, you could probably say, okay, in the grand scheme of things, this is probably going to be a slightly more left-wing government. It doesn't mean it's going to be left-wing with a capital L and a capital W, but I just mean, you know, imagine you're putting them on a little left to right spectrum next to each other or something. I think Labour still comes out the more Labourish one.
So socially, even the worst Labour government is better than the best Tory government. Socially speaking, I would say.
I mean, I think I can say without any doubt, I think that whatever form Starmer's government's probably going to take, it'll be better than the run of Tory governments we've had for a good few parliaments.
And if
Cat would do a better job running the country than this.
If I can add to what Swiss has said, that I get really annoyed with all the proper left wing Labour purists of the Corbyn era, where they're like, oh, I hate Keir Starmer, we should never vote for him, and I'm not going to vote for this centrist dad, and we should just all spoil our ballot paper and tell him what we really think. And I'm just like, my God, do you want to get this disgusting Tory government out, or would you rather that they stayed in just to spite the Labour Party in its current form? I used to be on the side of that sort of left wing group where it was we need these radical policies to improve the country, but at the end of the day, this is the package that we have. Yes, it's not brilliant, and it's just really frustrating that he keeps going back on these original pledges that
well, there is a theory in Labour, right? So when you're running for leadership, you apply to the left, right? And you promise loads of left-wing things, lots of gifts for the left wing. But then when you're running to lead the country, you apply to the centre, you pivot to the centre, and that's how you win an election. Or that's the Blairite theory of winning an election.
You have to end up compromising, because you have to understand that you can't get everything that you want. Yes, you want radical policies. Yes, you want a socialist agenda, but you have to accept that this country doesn't think the way that you think. And so you're not going to get everything that you want. You're not going to get humongous reform. You're not going to get a social care package overnight. You're not going to get all these lovely, nice things. And you have to compromise. And I know Keir Starmer is obviously not the best Labour leader we've had, and he's a humongous corporate sellout at this point. But what's the alternative? Would you rather?
There is something I want to say about this, because Batman Talks actually just made a comment, and which I think it leads in quite neatly to this. He said, at the moment, at least Labour are not corrupt. I think, and I think yes, he's right. But an interesting thing that I found out, I think it was last week. It was the news was released that membership of the Labour Party is down, but income is up. Okay?
They're getting more big donors again, aren't they?
They're getting more big donors. So what promises are they making? Right? People don't buy political influence for nothing. Right?
Mm.
If they're spending donating to a party, they are buying something.
Do
usually.
you think there's probably also an element though of like when you've got political betting on the bookies, right? It's what the punters reckon is going to happen. That's what informs
Right.
the odds. It's who's
Right.
who's voting on what.
Right.
I wonder if you've perhaps got a lot of business types basically just reading the room and going, yeah, you know what, Tories at the tail end, they'll be out, Labour they'll be in, throw them a bit of dosh, then I've got an ear to them, you know. But I mean, there's probably more at play than that as well. Don't get me wrong, but I think that's probably a basic component of it as well. I think probably there's just people that see the writing on the wall and go, yeah, Starmer, you know, he's making all the nice business friendly noises. Tories will probably be out. Opt to back them. Could I really quickly, because I've got like a growing list of things I wanted to reply to that you guys were talking about over the past couple of minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Run through them.
All right. So on first of all, when you were saying about Rowan, when you were saying about the sort of like the left, much more left wing types and their thoughts on Starmer. For one thing, I totally understand where they came from, because I think like when I first started doing my YouTube stuff, 2017-18, I think I was pretty well embedded within that wing of Labour at the time.
I think
as well.
I was as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So there's a sense of being able to sort of see things from both sides a little bit, and you know, I can totally understand. It's like, okay, you're big into Corbyn, you love the vision, you love the agenda, you want that transformative type of politics for the country. Things don't work out with Corbyn. Starmer comes in. He signs up to all the pledges in the leadership contest. He says he's going to continue on the program and all these core planks of the policy.
Yeah, Corbynism in a nice suit.
Yeah. And then over the course of 2-3 years, not only is that platform dismantled, but you've got Corbyn kicked out the party. You've got, you know, myriad of other things, and you'd feel betrayed, wouldn't you? You'd feel, oh, we've been lied to by Starmer and all the rest of it. I think for me personally with Starmer, it's like by the time he came in and started doing the things he did, even though, as I've said to you, I was a little bit surprised just how far he moved away from the Corbyn platform. I think I'd always expected him to renege on a fair bit of that anyway. I think that like you were saying, Champchi, about you do the leadership election to the left and then you do the general election to the centre.
Right.
I think the barrier to entry in that leadership election for anyone to stand a chance of winning was they were presented this set of 10 pledges. I think it was by the Momentum Group. I could be wrong on that, but I think it was. And basically it was like, you know, okay, however many candidates standing in this election to be leader, do you all sign up to these policy agenda objectives?
Right.
And obviously, I think they all said yes. I think every single one of them said yes to him, because
like things like renationalization of utilities, nationalization of transport companies, you know, and they're all like, all four of them,
Green New Deal, things like
Green
that.
New Deal,
exactly. And you know, why wouldn't you say yes to them? Even if all along you intended to go back on it, it would be like, right, well, it's electoral suicide before I've even got out the gate if I say no to them. I'm closing off a big bunch of voters for myself that way.
But the thing is, when you look at now that they've reneged on that, right, and they said that we're not going to renationalize the water companies. I know with power it's slightly different because they're going to set up their own power company, I believe, called Great British Power or something. They're going to have that in Scotland, I believe, right? Yeah. And I think that is a genuinely good policy I could get behind. But when asked about water, for example, and it is like now because of like all the reports of all the shit being pumped into the water supply, right, and into our rivers and seasides and everything like that, it's got overwhelmingly popular as a policy. And the other thing is, I don't think it'll be that expensive because they're bankrupt. They are bankrupt. So this is it. Going back to the two-child policy, right? This is, for me, it's a no-brainer. It really is a no-brainer.
Well, you bring me to the final thought I had on all that, which was
Okay, that was interesting.
you know, even though I don't have the same sort of venom towards Starmer as, like, you know, some people on the left of, or I say the left of Labour. I think quite a few of them are probably left Labour at this point. But you know, as much as some on the left do, it's more just
Maybe gone to join like the SDPs or something.
yeah, well, or the Greens or whoever.
Greens,
but,
I think.
But yeah,
Fucking Lib Dems are more left wing than bloody Labour at the moment.
on a personal level, if anything, I've just got a bit of an indifference towards Keir Starmer, really.
Right.
It's hard for me to emote. I've got to project things onto him instead to stay interested. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. The point I was going to say, though, is that, so, you know, I don't have that venom towards him. I can understand the roadmap he set out, which is appeal to the middle ground of voters, win the election, and that's how you get that stuff done, right?
Oh, Cooperman, you're. Oh, thank you.
He's muted.
Hello.
Oh, right. I'll get this done nice and quick. Hiya, John. Real quick. So, yes, I understand the roadmap he set out. I see that he's going, you know, softly, gently, tax to the centre, and then get in power. But even me acknowledging that and understanding the reason he's doing it and going, yeah, you know what, that's probably pretty sound electorally. I'm still finding him a little bit lacking in that ambition. When you mention a thing like the water companies, for example, that's an easy win of a policy.
Yes.
It's something that such a big bulk of the public is behind. You could allow yourself just a little bit more room to do a little bit more, and you probably wouldn't lose that much ground where you are.
Yeah, when questioned by the right wing, right? The right wing press, whether it be, I don't know, Andrew O'Neill or whoever, like Ian Dale, whoever, whichever right winger you want, and they say, how much would it cost for you to bring the water companies back into public hands? Well, then you answer it with a question: what's the cost of us not doing it? How much do you value your clean seasides? How much do you value your rivers? How much do you value your streams? How much do you value these beauty spots that, to be honest, England is quite famous for? You know,
I mean,
England is a beautiful country, and they are wrecking it. So what is the cost of that?
There's a great line there waiting to be used, which is the Conservatives haven't been conserving any of that, have they?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There we go. We should be in his policy wonk team. There we go.
Yeah. I was in my last video that I mentioned this when I was talking about how annoyed and irritated I was with Keir Starmer, which seemed to chime with a lot of people who watched that video. I was like, why can't he just be a little bit bolder and a little bit braver? Like, it's not, what is it going to cost you? Like, the only reason why Labour are 20 points ahead in the polls is because the Tories are just a pile of wank.
Very delicately put there, Reynolds.
There's just one thing I just want to just say about what Rowan and Swiss says about the whole ideological members not compromise, about the whole compromise thing. I think the reason they refuse to compromise is because they've done so in the past. They've seen what happens when the left done in the past, and every time they've done so, they get stabbed in the back, get kicked out, rejected, and all that stuff. And at this point, they just see no signs of trusting Starmer or any Blairite of even doing remotely some of the policies they want to do. So they're thinking like, why should we vote for you, even if you are supposed to be the lesser of two evils? Because when we've tried that argument, you said, no way, we're voting Lib Dems or Change UK or whatever centrists, or even voting Boris in when they've had their guys in. So I think that's why they don't trust it, and rather either vote, say, like Lib Dems or Greens if they could.
I think that Keir Starmer and et al. Are banking on those people voting for him anyway. Just their exploiting.
What was the Peter Madison line? They've got nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
If that's the case, they might just Starmer's just going to win by default. There's no point in voting anyway, because after all, Blair's 2 landslides were as a result of lower turnout. Granted, that was Tories not going out to vote, but you could also get a bunch of left-wingers not voting. Now, Granted,
Well,
I think
I want to disagree with that a little bit, right? I'm going to push back on you a little bit for that. Now, in the mid-90s, there was a lot of hope surrounding Blair. You know,
yeah,
that things were going to change after the soggy sandwich that we had with I've forgotten his name now, who came after Thatcher.
John Major.
John Major. There we go. Grey man. Yeah, he was a bit of a wet lettuce, right? So after that, he projected hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And over, past the Iraq War and everything else, there was nothing really coming from the Tory party, but you could see the vote share shrinking over the 13 years that they were in power, and with austerity in 2010. It really kind of beat the shit out of people, and people were in despair. And then in 2016, you had fuck, I'm losing all my names now. No. You had Corbyn, right? And Corbyn came in and said, "Hey, look, things don't have to be this way. Things can change." And here is a rock solid policy platform, and it gave people hope. Right, it gave people hope. It gave people, okay, so politics can work for me, because they'd felt hopeless. For years, a lot of people felt hopeless for years. They're like, I didn't vote for the Iraq War. I didn't vote for austerity. I didn't vote for the NHS to get fucked. I didn't vote for all of these things. So they felt hopeless with a lot of these policies. And Corbyn said, okay, here's how we're going to change things. And he got quite a lot of political following, right? Yeah. Obviously, it didn't work, so he went the way that he went.
Policies were interestingly. The policies were popular. The 2017 manifesto was popular. Like, take Corbyn out of the equation, and the policies alone attracted people.
Right, right.
Absolutely.
Which is
why Starmer took them into his pledges for leadership.
Right, absolutely. And for leadership, he got voted in on. Corbyn, as we said, in a nice suit, and so he got a lot of hopeful voices behind him saying, "Look, he's going to be good." Even a few voices on the left, he's going to be good. But U-turn after U-turn after U-turn after U-turn since 2019, it's 4 years. U-turn after U-turn. No, it's 2020. Sorry, he got voted in, wasn't it? It was the spring after. The election. And people don't have any hope left. I'm sorry, people don't. Right? They don't. When they look at the Labour Party, they don't see hope. They don't see the hope that they had in 2016, and they don't see the hope that they had in 1997. Okay. Now, here's an interesting thing. Right. Again, this is something that I picked up on in 2016. In 2016. It's 2017, sorry. There was a big swing to Labour, right, from Conservative. This was an anti-austerity vote. I believe the only reason that we didn't get it is because Scotland had already been lost in the elections before, right? So without Scotland, without that 50 seats, it was very, very difficult to win an election. But it was an anti-austerity vote. Okay, in 2019, okay, Boris got in. What was there were three slogans that they used.
Get
Two
Brexit
slogans.
done.
Get Brexit done, and what was the other one?
Level up Britain.
Level up Britain, build back better. Right, leveling up. It was an anti-austerity vote as well as a Brexit vote. Right, and now we've got Sunak, the bean counter, and we got Hunt. As the thing of difficult choices, we can't afford. It's more austerity. And then when they look at Rachel Reeves, another neoliberal, and they're not committing to any spending, it's like, have you not paid attention? Over these anti-austerity votes?
Yeah, and also I would also argue that there's also a history with Rachel Reeves saying we'll be tough on the Tories on benefits. So there's also a bit of the history on that as well with some of these politicians. And I think another factor is if you look at the US and you've got Joe Biden, typical centrist, maybe neoliberal, type of boomer politician. But he seemed to be at least willing to work with the American left on some actual issues. Now how much you think he succeeded or failed on those, I think that can be up for debate, particularly I think on the student loan debt thing. But he seems to have at least attempted to do so.
Right.
But see, Starmer, in comparison, has shown not to do anything. So when you've seen like other countries do it and not our own, you kind of get the idea of like that this can actually happen. This can actually happen, but the Labour right just don't want to do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of the success of Biden in America is because he actually embraced the left of his party and he made allowances, right? And so they've got the anti-inflation bills going through. They've got the lowest inflation in the G7. Things like building infrastructure products. Okay, they were watered down by the right of the party because he has such a slim majority in the House, like 2, I think. So they do get watered down a bit, but at least they're doing it. Whereas Starmer has treated the left with contempt, I think. So, and I think he's going to need the left to win the next election. He will still be the next prime minister, even if he doesn't do that, right? But I think this will be the difference between him and getting a majority and them being a hung parliament. That's what I think. Because the left are the people that go door knocking. The left of the party, they're the people that give out leaflets. It's the left of the party that are standing on street corners talking about trying to get the vote out, right? If they say it's going to be in December, right? They say, it's going to be another winter election, and the Tories do this on purpose because they know people don't. The groundwork of Labour is so strong, right? They know it'll stop people from going out in the numbers that they normally would. So, but that's just my opinion. I like my analysis.
I think I probably disagree slightly. In terms of,
Please do.
I think you sort of placed it as the difference between him winning a majority himself and a hung parliament, right?
Right.
I think that the realms we're in really are to do with the size of the majority rather than whether he becomes prime minister. I think that
I think that the implosion of the SNP has something to do with that, though.
And
not
the
necessarily.
I mean the implosion of the SNP is definitely going to aid Labour, but if anything, that's the icing on the cake. The real thing that's aided them is the implosion of the Tories. That's that's the big meat that's helping them out there. But I think it comes back.
I think they're relying on that quite a lot at the moment. I think when it comes to the election, they're going to realise actually no, we actually need to say what we're going to do rather than just
say what we're not going to do.
We're
not the Tories.
But I think it comes down to, in terms of political positioning, I think it still comes down to a very basic calculation as far as probably what Starmer's thinking, which is, where's the bigger voter pool for me to draw on here to get me the most seats? Is it, am I bringing on board more voters from tacking centre than I'm losing by alienating the left? That's the calculation being made.
Right. It's a very different calculation to what Corbyn did. So rather than because what I see, just confirming this, what I see Starmer doing is he wants to attract Tory voters, right? Whereas Corbyn expanded the voter base. So it's a very different voting tactic.
I think what he's relying on, I sort of mentioned it earlier, that he's relying on the left, like the left chunk of like the membership and the country voting for him despite all of the U-turns, because like they're not going to vote Tory, are they? Let's face it, and they're probably not going to vote Lib Dem. So I think what he's taking advantage of the fact, and like he's banking on. And like, I don't know whether this is gonna, come to fruition come, the exit poll, whenever that is. But I just think that he's banking on like the left voting for him, despite going back on a whole bunch of stuff that he said that he was going to do and now isn't going to do. And also the fact that I think I count myself as one of these people that I know that he said that they're not going to do something. But I'm hoping against hope that once they get into power, they're going to have to do stuff that they said they're not going to do. just
Right.
just the political, like just to try and improve things, and also the pressure that they're going to get put under to actually do something that they perhaps don't really want to do. They're going to get forced into doing that by the left wing, the trade unions, etc. So I'm hoping that, they're not saying a lot at the moment, but when they actually get into office, they're going to have to do these things.
I think some might find that a little bit politically naive from what seen. So I think, let's see. Now, granted, I think more left wingers might be more enthusiastic if it was the more likely that Labour would be in a sort of hung parliament and they had to rely on something like Lib Dems, SNP, or Greens, if you will, which might force them to do more left wing or even social policies. Because let's see, we're dealing with like Rosie Duffield. We've seen that Labour is going to probably abandon some of their social policies, particularly in more of the LGBT part. Mm-hmm. So the Lib Dems someone like the Lib Dems or Greens might force them to be a bit more, you'd see, at least keep them at where they are at the very least. Mm. But since like a Swiss and Championship pointed out, the fall of the SNP, that is pretty much probably guaranteed Labour a majority of some kind. For like,
I don't know. I don't know the arithmetic of it. It'll be Scotland will be very, very interesting to watch on election night. Yeah. Exactly how many seats swing. Yeah. Like I said, I think this power policy that they've got, and he's very, very specifically targeting Scotland with this policy. So the fact that the power station is in Scotland, is going to be in Scotland, and the jobs that will create and the revenue that's going to create.
I think at the very least, he's going to have to win back the red wall seats, get all of the main urban centres, obviously London, Manchester, Liverpool.
Yeah. Also, because I think if Starmer gets a Blair landslide, he can just pretty much ignore the left, like Blair did for like many years. And it's not until like Labour had a bit more of a smaller majority that they went back on, where they started to do a bit, perhaps more a few left-wing policies, if you will, but like that. But by the way, I sent this to Swiss like probably a couple of weeks back, but he never got, but he was much busy doing his Pokemon Nuzlocke challenge. But let's see, there's there's a what if poll, I think, that was done by Maura Common, I think, about what if Corbyn was still Labour leader in an election in August. And do you mind if I just share it? Or
yeah,
could I share one more thought just before we jump into the poll, just on what we were previously talking about? I think on Scotland, the number of seats that Labour could win in Scotland is by no means a negligible amount. It's absolutely going to aid them with their overall numbers. But I think that in the 2010 election and in the 2015 election, that SNP dominance we saw in 2015, that was obviously very pronounced at the time because Labour and the Tories were so close to one another in the polls and in terms of their number of seats. The amount of seats up for grabs in Scotland made more of a difference based on how close they were elsewhere in the UK. I think this election, one of the key features is the fact that Labour are so far ahead of the Tories at the moment and are set probably to gain so many seats from the Tories, not to mention the Lib Dems gaining a fair few from the Tories as well. Although Labour's seats in Scotland are obviously going to be very useful to them, and it's going to numerous reasons why they want to gain seats in Scotland. It's not quite like those seats in Scotland are going to be those kingmaker seats that they would have been in, say, 2015 or back in that kind of a context, And just very quickly as well, because I think Rowan was talking about sort of her thoughts on what she expects from a Labour government and why you'd be voting Labour next time round. I think at this point where I've got to is, above all other things, I think the Tories need to be punished for their absolute incompetence over the past few years. I mean, you know, the Tories are the Tories, and they do awful Tory things every year anyway. But especially in the last few years, it's like they've not even been able to run an effective Tory government. We don't like the Tory governments, but they've not even been able to run an effective
It's not
version of that.
incompetent.
Yeah,
Right.
they've broken so many rules. You had Liz Truss coming along and spooking the markets. You had Boris Johnson absolutely degrading the office of Prime Minister. You had so many things along those lines. I just feel that if there's any sense of the voters offering justice to this political system, the Tories need to be out and have a nice little wilderness period to, you know, have a jolly good think about what they've done, you know?
Yeah, go and sit in a corner and think about what you've done.
Exactly, yeah. So,
On the naughty step with you Tories.
yeah. So I'm not sure what I'm hoping for from Starmer. I think it's best that I'm not going to get my hopes up that there's suddenly going to be a big change attack once he's in power, and suddenly we get all these great transformative policies. But I kind of go back to what I said before, which is that it's not a matter of trust with him. It's not me having a personal sense of trust in any one thing that he says, but it's just a general sense of reading the landscape and going, yeah, I think a Labour government incoming is going to be better than the Tory government outgoing. So
I'd agree with that.
that's kind of where I'm at with it, really.
Yeah, I think that the Lib Dems are an unknown factor as well. So we had
I think they'll do well in the southwest.
yes, yeah, they tend to do well in the southwest. I mean, they won that seat quite recently, a huge swing to the Lib Dems, and Labour didn't even try to win that seat, which was quite interesting. But they are a very different party to what they were in 2019. And I've heard them outflanking Labour to the left with regards to tax policy. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I find Ed Davey one of the most. He's like the weird science of politicians, right? So like, if you were to type into a computer what is a politician, and you'd have like Ed Davey there, the way he talks, the way he acts, the way he walks, everything is just so politician about him.
So like he's just like a plank of wood. Like all I've seen him do were those wall stunts or like the clock. Like time's ticking for the Tories.
Oh yeah, God.
Anyway,
but it's so much better than Joe Swinson, though, wouldn't it? Like head girl Joe Swinson. Remember her?
Yeah.
Oh my
Honestly,
God.
if it wasn't for the fact that Corbyn had the result he did, I think people would have looked at her campaign and say that was the worst run campaign in modern electoral history, besides Theresa May's.
I guess at least with Ed Davey, I don't. Sorry, John. I know you want to get onto that poll. Last thing, then. I guess at least with Ed Davey, he's a bit like Starmer. I don't have any strong feelings about him,
right?
But I know that I had strong feelings about Joe Swinson. So
yes,
anyway, can you see what I'm sharing? Or
hang on. I'll share it.
Yeah. Anyway, as you can probably see here, this came out like back in August, and apparently if Corbyn was leader, now granted Labour would not be, of course, 10 or 20 points ahead, but they would be a point ahead of the Conservatives, and you have Lib Dems doing quite well, as I think you saw in the late Corbyn years as well. And from what I could tell from the electoral calculus, if that was if it was a poll, if that poll came out in that result, you would have gotten something like this, with either the Lib Dems or the SNPs being kingmakers from like this poll here, which on one hand you could, let's see, I think I've seen a bunch of centrists go like, and even Tories like, see Corbyn's still unpopular, he's still do badly, or the Tories could still possibly win under him. But I suppose another way you could look at this sort of poll is, you see the Tories are doing so bad that the Labour leader that's been the most hated since Blair could potentially win an election against them.
I think I see where you're going with that. The idea that they're doing that poorly, that even Corbyn, who lost 2 elections, could potentially beat them. But I think, to be honest, my main takeaway looking at that is that it sort of shoots the fox of people saying, "Oh, Labour's only as far ahead as they are because of how bad the Tories are doing." That factors in big time, no doubt. But then you look at this poll, assume it's relatively accurate, and then you go, okay, well, Labour under the previous leader, you go from a nearly 20-point lead to virtually no lead at all.
Yeah, but that's interesting because you had, when Corbyn was leader, he was relentlessly attacked by the right-wing press, whereas Starmer, conversely, is
Starmer's
not
having a
really-
massive honeymoon period.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but he is. But I think there was a point made about this on LBC that the papers can sense the shift in the tide, and they don't want to be denied access when there is that change.
It's like what I was saying about the donors in a way.
Government.
It's all of us. I think all of us sense that we're coming up for a change election, aren't we? And all the movers and shakers in journalism and finance and all the rest of it, they see it too.
Yeah. And I know that Starmer's a relatively safe bet, as far as they know, because he's not nearly as left wing as Corbyn was. You know, I mean, I don't know where like Starmer started. He was relatively left wing, like centre left, not like massively as left as Corbyn, but centre left. Whereas
You think
now,
he was at least a social democrat or something?
Yeah. Whereas now he's shifted to the centre. He's much more warmed to by the business.
I believe John has compared him to David Cameron in 2010.
I think I think
Didn't go that far.
in his younger years, maybe in his 20s or in university, I think Starmer used to write for some kind of a socialist magazine or something
He
like
used to
that.
be a proper socialist back then. Yeah.
He started off pretty left wing, but yeah, I think all in all, the press are giving Starmer an easier time of it. But I think it's a matter of like if you look at like you've got like certain Tory backing publications that are kind of near enough always going to go Tory or always lean that way, like The Sun, stuff like that, for example. But then you've got slightly more, you've got others that are slightly more willing to change with the wind, I suppose. You've got some that are depending
like Times Radio?
Like what, sorry?
Like Times Radio?
Yeah, I think the Times is probably, Times is an example there that I think there are some that will, like, regardless of which Labour leader it is. I mean, God, I was looking at some Ed Miliband stuff from years back, and so many of the papers that dubbed him Red Ed.
Yeah.
And I thought, Jesus, this was pre-Corbyn. If they thought he was Red Ed.
Big Dad was on like his dad at some point as well.
Yeah. And it's like, I think if they were going after Starmer with the same viciousness that they did, I'm not using Corbyn as an example. I'm going to say Miliband because we know enough about Corbyn, but Miliband was arguably less to the left of the party than Corbyn was.
Yeah.
If they were going to go after Starmer with the same viciousness they went after Miliband, then they'd be digging up all the things that Starmer ever said back when he was a student or in his early 20s and all of the very left-wing positions he might have held back then, and they'd be running all that through. And it seems that there's just not the same appetite for them doing it. I think in the run-up to the election, whatever like newspapers that are still going to back the Tories at this election, they might give it a go. But I think that there's not going to be that united front that you had maybe the better part of 10 years ago.
That's a really interesting point that I didn't think of before. I mean, I think you're right that we can visibly see the Tories running out of steam. Like there's no, visionary, policy or legislation that they're coming up with other than
It's just culture wars, isn't it? That's all they've got.
Culture wars, stop the boats. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Like they've got nothing else to run with. So, and I think the papers and the media pick up on that and like, well, if we can't see that we're going to benefit out of this, then, and we can see the tides are changing, then we're going to think about switching sides, at least for a period.
You don't want to be on the losing side, do you?
No.
That's it.
No. But also, like, additionally, isn't that such a sad state of affairs for our politics that, our elections are decided by what the media thinks?
I'd definitely say the influence they've had over elections arguably since as early as Thatcher has been a problem for UK elections. As I think before Thatcher came along, the Sun would either endorse both Labour and Tories, and not always would endorse the winning party.
It was
that's
the 1970s, isn't it, when Murdoch took over the Sun?
yeah. And since when Murdoch took over, you pretty much got like just this like media shift to like this one way, and that's the only way to win politics. And frankly, it's been a very slow decline.
Managed
Managed decline. Yeah.
Managed decline to like all of our public sectors and all our financial things, and also I guess even like political electoral climate as well.
I think it's I'll say quickly, I think it's a feedback loop of sorts. I think obviously the public is affected by what the media says, but also the media is affected by what the public thinks as well. I think that if you're in the run up to a big enough sea change, like for example the expected change of government at the next election, or just the Tories running out of steam, as we've said, I think if there's enough of a sense amongst a big enough bulk of the public just saying, yeah, you know what, we've had enough, we need something else, we don't want these guys anymore, then you're not unless you're the Sun or the Express, maybe you're not going to swim against that tide quite strongly.
The only time the Express has ever endorsed Labour was in 2001. Sorry, go on.
But that said, I still think that the next general election will be vicious, like really rabid, like, and it'll be very, very unpleasant still. There'll still be like that, tranche of like the Sun and the Mail that will just be like rabidly, like they'll just be saying like really almost libelous stuff.
Did you guys see any of the SNP leadership debates?
You mean the stuff on the trans issues?
Everything. Like their televised debates were brutal. They were tearing chunks out of each other. It was great. If you're an English person watching it, it's great. But if you're in Scotland, I would have been worried, man. I would have been very, very worried. Yeah, they were.
Well, I
really
guess it kind of showed how.
Yeah,
I think it goes to show you how much during the, I guess, Alex Salmond years and even the Sturgeon years, how they were able to like keep the party united despite their differences.
Absolutely.
But
Say what you like about Salmond and et al. They were solid politicians.
And
this new crop was just a bit like they're not quite filling the void of that Sturgeon left. This Yusuf guy, he's a bit.
To be fair on Yusuf, he seems to have inherited a bit of a political mess, kind of like how Brown did in 2007, then following up to the year of 2008. But yeah, now granted, of course, that's not to say he's entirely without blame, but he does seem to have inherited a mess of sorts.
He's in a bit of a Sunak position, really, which is that you're becoming the leader and the person in charge at a time that there's just so many things that have happened prior, some of which you may have been involved with, but some of which are out of your control, that you just, again, you can't swim against the tide. There's only so much that you can do to kind of hit the big reset button, and sometimes you're just doomed to go down with the ship.
Yeah. And in some ways, the best thing you can do is try and minimize the damage as much as possible.
Yeah, pretty much. Damage limitation, manage the decline, try to stem the bleeding as much as you can.
Because I think that the best Sunak can do is try and cause something similar to 2010, even though that seems to be in reverse. But that doesn't seem even likely to happen now. But I think he will probably make sure that it's not a Blair level of landslide. Since I think if Starmer's just going to keep being the same as what he is pre
diet,
diet Tory, I think you're going to get a lot of the electorate less enthusiastic and shifting either to like Lib Dems or Greens. As to be fair, the Greens have been doing pretty well in by-elections and locals lately, but they've become third in quite a few places.
Council elections have been doing really well.
But it might be possible that if Starmer's not careful, instead of having like 2 terms, he might end up being 1 term. Now, granted, it's likely, I think, with the way polling goes to show, Labour's probably at least guaranteed 2 terms. Though, having said that, Boris was expected to have at least another 2
He
terms.
can stop himself though. Like
But
everything
then he
he did was
shot
just,
his-
like it's
so-
just a liar, and like he
Yeah.
just couldn't stop himself. From
Yeah, he just kind of shot himself in the foot on that one, and I doubt Starmer would be that self-shot in the foot. But
Yeah.
I definitely
I think
think
people can't tolerate when the government tell you to do something important and they seem to do the opposite. I think that's what they can't stand. And then
But,
when people die as a result, that's that really gets people up the wrong way. But
yeah, I definitely think that Starmer needs to be careful because he probably ideally wants to be like wants a 1997 to a 2001, let's see, for in the following election. But if he's not careful, it might go to 1997 to more something like 2005, which is enough for, like, I'd say, an opposition to try and get into government next election afterwards.
So here's an interesting question. It's a bit like out in the ether, but so Sunak, right? He loses the next election, right? He has to resign. That seems to be the way it goes, right? So he resigns. Who replaces him?
I think
that's another big question.
I think most people are theorizing maybe Penny Mordaunt to try and, which they think that might be the safe.
Lady.
That might
I
be
was gonna mention Penny Mordaunt as being in the running, but the only thing
She
with
called
that is that
Keir Starmer like Beach Ken this week, didn't she?
sorry,
She
One more
called she called Keir Starmer Beach Ken this week.
Beach Cat. Oh, like from Barbie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
He doesn't have any balls.
That's pretty
Yeah,
good.
like, that's fair.
Ouch.
With Penny Mordaunt, I'm pretty darn sure she'll end up running, and her name's definitely touted. But the thing is, judging by the way that the Tory membership have gone the last few times they've had the chance to vote and not been overruled by the MPs, if you throw a big slab of Tory red meat there instead of Penny Mordaunt, they'll probably end up going for that instead. If the membership,
Well, like Braverman.
yeah. You know, if you throw another, if you throw another person from the right of the party in there, and it's them or Mordaunt, I wouldn't trust the Tory members not to go for the right winger instead.
I suppose it depends on how much or how many of the ERG are still hanging on
Are
to
they
their
still
seats.
are they still relevant?
They've taken over the party, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the new Labour years. You know, the Tories in opposition had to go through Ian Duncan Smith before they got to the great moderniser David Cameron.
But surely, if the Tories lose the next election and they continue with their like far right agenda, and they have someone from that wing of the party from the ERG or whatever new group they've got. Surely, like, why would they continue with that sort of agenda when it was a losing? You know, it was part of the reason why they lost the election. Why would they continue with that sort of ideology?
Sometimes when you lose an election, you kind of double down on the things. Like, look at the Trump lot. Despite the fact that he lost 2020, you've got many Republicans doubling down on Trump, thinking, oh, he's a victim and all that stuff. So they may do that. But I think with really determine on who's the next Tory leader, it depends on which faction gets in terms of seats gets annihilated. The more that are like the liberal wing of the Conservative Party, let's say, or the more Boris or Brexit right wing of the Tory Party, if you will. Because I think depending on which faction loses the more MPs would probably likely determine who ends up getting on the ballot. Now, if it's someone like Suella Braverman, arguably you probably might say she's
got the ambition to stick herself on the ballot, and I think she will get a few votes.
Yeah. And if she was like right, and arguably if she portrays herself as too right wing enough, arguably it could be too much for the public that they'll just stick with Starmer, like they did when Ian Duncan Smith and what was that other guy? Trying to remember his name.
You had Michael Howard and William Hague, but it depends which
William Hague, yeah. William Hague and
Yeah, but William Hague was quite a political heavyweight at the time.
yeah, but his cabinet was full of right wingers. Remember?
One other juicy thought I've had though is that if a Tory moderates were to win a future leadership election, they'd probably have to do the same kind of thing that Starmer did to win his in Labour. They'd have to sign up to a lot of very right-wing sounding things and saying, yes, I believe in all this stuff, and then probably gradually, drag themselves towards the centre when they're leader. But the question is, can they do it in a single bound? I think the mindset of the Tory membership, because they are the ones who would end up picking if it goes to them, they're going to stick with where they are at the moment. And I think you'll get a wilderness period for the Tories.
Only when it gets down to 2, though. That's right? So they have a bunch, right? And they need X number of votes to get on the ballot, right?
Yeah.
And then they whittle it down until there's just 2, and then it goes to the membership. Is that correct? I believe that's right. Right.
So I know what you're saying is hypothetically it could just be the MPs pick another one and the members don't even get a vote. But the thing is that the Tory membership they're up in arms at the moment about the fact that 2 prime ministers that they'd picked had been removed, and then Sunak
right, exactly,
and they didn't get a say on it. So there'd be absolute mutiny amongst the Tory grassroots if they didn't get to pick their next leader.
To be honest, I don't think the Tory party gives a shit about their grassroots at the moment.
I just to say, Sky Echo in the chat says, I think Badenoch is more of a leader than Braverman, but that's neither a compliment nor an endorsement.
Right. Yeah, I think again, Kemi Badenoch, I think she has the ambition, and you can see that.
I still think she's an awful person.
Oh, absolutely. I think she went to the same witches' school as Braverman. So. I'll tell you what, James O'Brien said a throwaway line the other day, and I just made me laugh out loud. And he was talking about Braverman. He said, "I don't know what she's doing nowadays. Probably polishing her broomstick." I was just, what?
So I think, so from what I think Swiss is saying, that Starmer's probably likely to have 2 terms in Parliament, is what you're saying, right?
I'm not necessarily pinning myself to that as a prediction, but I think what I was saying is that I expect the Tory members, should they get a vote, will pick the more right wing of their 2 candidates to choose from. And I think that with Starmer occupying the centre ground, the Tories won't be able to make many inroads. So I guess, yeah, that probably means you're looking at multiple Starmer or multiple Labour terms, but we'd have to see, events, my dear boy. We'd have to see what happens.
Because I think the thing that concerns me is, even though yes, everyone's going to vote for Starmer now, but I feel like I think is lack of enthusiasm for him a second time will probably greatly reduce whatever Labour majority they get.
It all depends what happens during their time in office, whether they actually are going to be in any way transformative, or they're just going to have more of the same, but less bad.
Or if you get to the next election after this one and you say, okay, Labour's not been very transformative, but they're the ones in now. The Tories are continuing on down their path of trying to be as right wing as they possibly can. We actually think they're going to be transformative in the wrong direction. So I guess we'll stick with nice old bland Keith rather than going for that.
What? Keith Starmer, the kid starver.
Yeah. What I was going to say is it will be interesting, and I'd be happy to join any stream. I mean, I might do one. It depends what Swiss wants to do or anybody else. The night of the general election, I might book the day off actually afterwards, because I'd be really happy.
It's an all-nighter, isn't it? It's an all-nighter. It's gonna be an interesting one.
And
it's
watch.
Definitely gonna...
I'm hoping this will be like Tory obliteration evening, and we'll just watch like people like Dulles cry in a sports centre at like 2 a.m.
I've been in that Stoke-on-Trent sports centre.
I want to bet. I'll put money on that. Like that's the highlight. Jonathan Dulles in bits, losing his seat.
I I mean, I will absolutely be streaming for the election because that's like that's the one date in my calendar you can guarantee I'm going to be doing a stream when we've got a general election. Obviously, you are more than welcome to join mine, but don't for a moment think because I'm doing one that means you can't do one as well. Like if you want to be hosting one, I'm not the only show in town.
There's a question from
where I was staying up all night before it.
By the way, Cameron has done asked a question. What sort of majority do you think Labour are going to have?
I think
Okay, so like, can we qualify this question before we move? Because I don't know the answer to this question, right? Swiss, you might know. With the border changes that are coming, how many seats will there be to fight over? Because there's 650 right now, right? So, I mean, how many seats will be left?
Oh, let me give that a quick Google.
That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to.
I think it's relevant to Cameron's question, though. Blair did a border change, didn't he?
Yes, and Scotland particularly went from 79 seats to 56 when that happened. In some ways,
drinking game on Tories losing their seats could be dangerous for your health, though something to the soul.
Granted, the way now how you could see that is
you can also read it as how many seats do you think the Tories are going to lose?
From what I've seen here, I'm going to continue doing a little bit more digging. But what I'm reading so far is it's about changing the size of certain seats and abolishing others, combining others, etc. I'm not seeing anything about a change in the total number of seats here, but maybe just a rejigging of which ones are in which boundaries. But let me carry on looking. I'll get back to you.
Right, sweet. Okay, so back to the original question. What sort of majority do you think Labour are going to have? I don't think it's as clear cut as the Labour camp thinks it's going to be. So let's imagine there's still 650 seats, right? How many seats do I think they'll get? If they get a majority, I think it is going to be quite small. I think it's going to be about 5 seats. So I think they'll get about 335 seats. Not many.
I can jump in with a quick little paragraph on the seat changes for you.
All right, sweet.
Read out real quick. So how are the constituency boundaries changing? The number of seats in the House of Commons will remain the same after previous plans to reduce them from 650 to 600 were abandoned in 2020. As far as redistribution between the nations go, England will gain 10 seats, Scotland will lose 2, Wales will lose 8, and the number of Northern Irish seats will remain the same. Within England, the number of seats in the East Midlands, east of London, South East and South West will increase, while the number of seats in the North East, North West, West Midlands will decrease. The number of seats in Yorkshire and the Humber will stay the same.
Wow. Okay. So not a huge change then. Not like earth-shakingly changing.
Yeah. Well, it's from what it says here. Because obviously, like the boundaries are changing, right? The number of seats between nations not changing too much, but in terms of how many existing seats are going to have their boundaries changed, actually 533 of the constituencies in England will have their boundaries changed. So the seats may still exist in the same name as they had before or whatever, but they will have slightly different borders from what they had before. So yeah. Hard to say. What had you said at first? Sorry, when you were saying what you thought the numbers might be at the next election.
Right. Okay. So let's, for argument's sake, let's say the number of seats is the same. Okay, more or less. All right. So I said that, which is 650, right? So I said that going back to the original question, I don't think it's going to be as clear cut as Labour thinks it's going to be. If they get a clear majority, which I think the implosion needs to continue on the SNP for them to actually do that, I think they'll get around 330 to 335 if they get a majority. But like I said, I'm not feeling it. But I suppose this will pan out in the campaigning time, and let's see what happens after campaigning. But yeah, that's what my feeling is now.
Okay, that's your now cast. Basically.
That's my now cast.
I think I'm in two minds. Really, I'm not sure, because obviously this is not in election campaign period where polls change quite drastically. So I at the moment I think I'm thinking it will be, and I want it to be, hung parliament territory where they'll have to rely on Lib Dems and Greens, which will ultimately force them to do a bit more left-wing stuff.
But the one little thing I'll pick up on is Caroline Lucas is standing down, and she was an incredibly adept MP and politician, and so I don't think that that one seat. I actually think they'll get more, but they'll be in other places, not in is Brighton and Hove, right? I
feel like Bristol. Is it some place in Bristol?
Some places in Bristol, yeah, absolutely. Bristol's a very left-wing city, though. Generally, same as Brighton is a very left-wing city. So, it'd be interesting to see what happens in Bristol.
Yeah, I think the projection is at the moment. I mean, like the general narrative is that Labour are going to get a majority, but I think come their actual election proper, there'll be a much more slimmed.
With regards to the SNP, I mean, I think Sky Echo's quite right in the side chat here. Is I don't think it will be a complete Labour takeover of Scotland. I think they will gain a few seats in Scotland, and I also think that the SNP will have their majority cut quite drastically in a lot of seats, and a lot of those seats will then become marginal. I know a lot of them are marginal anyway, but I think a lot the majorities will be cut quite severely, and a lot of the SNP politicians will find their seats quite precarious. So they will make inroads in Scotland, but not as much as they think. And I think the Red Wall's basically gone. I mean, that was a Brexit vote. And Build Back Better or Levelling Up has not happened.
Yeah.
So and they're like,
why did I let you? Whatever chance the Tories have had of keeping those seats, they have blown it.
My now cast for the next election, where we presently are. On the Greens, quickly, I'll say them keeping Brighton Pavilion. Yes, I think that's solidly green at the moment. The Bristol one, I'll have to take a look at, but I'm going to guess they'll come second place for the time being. Big picture, I think probably in the ballpark of a Labour majority of about 50. That's what I'm saying at the moment. I don't. At this stage, I'm not quite going to buy the projections that say, "Oh, they'll get a 100-seat majority."
Yeah, I don't buy that at all.
Blah blah
I don't
blah.
buy that too.
But yeah, I think with the very, very healthy lead they've got in the polls at the moment, I think that probably a reasonable sized majority of around 50 is probably where they could at least be on course for. So that's what I'll go with for now.
Yeah.
So equivalent to Johnson in 2019.
I'd say midway point between Johnson 2019 and Cameron 2015. That's where they'll end.
Right. Okay.
And also, another question for you all. I predicted in my last video that the election is going to be held October of next year. That's my shout. But what do you guys think?
Okay, let's have Koofman answer both those two questions in one, and then because you didn't answer the first question.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. If I had to guess, well, everyone's saying that and electoral caucus is going like 400 to 413 or something, but I think. Likely more of, let's see what Blair got in 2005 and what Johnson got in 2019. The only difference is whether or not the Lib Dems will probably be more similar to 2000. We'd see it'll probably be a split between Lib Dems and SNP on like 20 and 30 seats between them. Because I don't think the SNP are going to be completely annihilated.
No, that's right. I don't think so. I don't think so.
So, and as for when the next election calls, the next election happens, well, we know that Sunak wants to have it in the autumn. The only thing is whether or not it's if he's forced earlier. So I think, arguably, probably September is just right back into Parliament. So I don't think Sunak wants to have an election in September. I think as July and August is pretty much when everyone is trying to have their holidays. I think he'll definitely want to try and avoid those days, because I think everyone's like, you're wasting our holidays or days off for like a blooming election. So I think they will likely try October the earliest, but maybe or at least announce an election in October and have it in November.
Interesting.
Yeah. You said a lot of interesting things there, John. I think we need to understand the political dynamics of the Tory party currently. Now, as far as I can see, but again, I see things from the outside. You guys are on the inside, so I don't I'm the other side of the world. So, what I can see is that the Tory party, they just don't like Sunak. They don't like him, right? They were forced into appointing him as Prime Minister. Politically, Sunak has no political capital with his own party, let alone the public, right? And I think he knows this. And so he might just go a big fuck you to his party and call it much earlier. He might. Depends how spiteful he might be. I just want to get the fuck out of this place. It's doing my head in, and fuck off back to America, like you were saying earlier, right? I think that'll be fucking great for the political neutral and for someone. Yeah, I think this next election will be my last vote.
Because they can't possibly have another leadership election.
They can't.
Can't.
They can't. The public don't want it.
No.
They don't want it.
I mean, if you get like 4 prime ministers in one term, the public is saying,
you got to have a general election. I'm sorry, you've got to.
Yeah.
It's not like Japan. It's not like with Japan and their politics.
I think unless you had some Johnson or Truss level blow up with Sunak, then any attempt to oust him would just be a bit of a damp squib. Really, I don't think it would work.
Right? Yeah, I don't think it'll work. But as I said, I think he has zero political capital with his party because they don't like him, and he has zero political capital with the public, and because he has no mandate. Right? To have political capital, you have to have a mandate, and you have to have actual policies, right? So
Chamchi,
so yeah,
he's got 5 of them. Votes, halve inflation.
Stop the boats.
Yeah, stop the boats. So I think if he wants, I don't know. This is something about Rishi Sunak's psyche that I don't know about. Does he want power just for power's sake? Or is he trying to skew policy into what he actually believes in, which I don't think he really believes in much himself anyway. So I don't know. This is what I don't know about Sunak. So on the face of it, I think he's going to go for a winter election. So December. The latest it can be is January 2025, right? That's the latest it can be. But I think he's going to aim for December just because it affects Labour's groundwork, right? And he's going to make things as difficult as possible for Labour. Yeah. But there is a kind of joker card in there that I will leave hanging, and that he just go, screw you guys, I'm going home. It takes his ball and leaves the playground, right? Yeah.
Or calls on like December this year.
Right,
I can't go on anymore. I can't be bothered.
I think for me then, I don't think he'll leave it until the absolute last point of 2025, just because I think not only does that look really bad just on the Tories going, wow, you've absolutely clinged to it as long as you possibly could, but it's not a good time to have an election, really. You don't want to have an election that time of year. Just the public won't thank you for it, hard to get people out, all those other reasons. I think I'd probably say the autumn of next year. I think that's probably what I've heard the most of people saying, you know, media and all the rest of it, and you know, I've got to base my assumptions off of something.
I think that's
Right,
the
Sunak a
general
little bit more
consensus.
time. If he's if he was gonna go for the spring, then you know, God, look at the calendar. He's only got about 6-7 months left to go before you're in election campaign season. I think Sunak would want a little bit more time to go, right, can I make things look any better than they are now?
Well, this is it. What do they say on the doorstep, right? Like, name anything.
Yeah.
Anything at all, right?
I think
anything that's better since
Yeah.
the Tories took over.
I think
Anything.
I've noticed what they're trying to do now. It's because they're so desperate. Is that they're starting to? I mean, I know that they've always done this, but they're using it more and more. Is that they're trying to blame like previous Labour administrations for why things are bad now. It's like,
are they getting the Treasury letter
Labour
out
also
again?
didn't spend money on like replacing
yeah.
broken concrete either, so blame them as well. It's like, I don't think that.
Yeah, I think that won't work at this point because, well, it might have worked back in the Miliband years when it was just entirely, let's see, they just got into government, but they've been in for like 13 plus years at this point, and they've had their own scandals with their own prime ministers now that they can't really excuse it. And the only prime minister to last long term they've had was David Cameron under a coalition.
Well, I mean, they do one of two things, right? And yes, you're right, Rowan. The one thing they're doing is they're still blaming the last Labour government. They still bring out the letter, ever enough, there's no money left, right? They still bring that out. But what I've noticed, this is more nuanced, right? And this is something that I've noticed. When you have like the Offices of National Statistics, and they come up with these statistics, right? What they do is they change the goalposts. Okay. Oh no, you can't count it like that. Let's count it like this instead, right? And so what they're doing is they're massaging their figures, right? Yeah, they can see for themselves that things are going downhill, and they're going pretty downhill rapidly. Everything is failing. Everything is failing.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day, and I was talking to her about the all of the strikes, right? Name a single sector that hasn't been on strike in the last year, right? And I was going through the list, and I was actually, as I was listing them, I was actually quite amazed. And she was like, she's American, right? She's like, is there anything who hasn't been on strike? I was like, yeah.
I think council workers haven't been, because I know that we've been balloted, and I know my county's council, we did get balloted, but there wasn't enough votes.
But I take the point though, when you've got the trains and the teachers and the doctors and the nurses and near enough. I mean, even over in the States, you've got all the film actors and writers on strike at the moment, haven't you?
Everyone's driving instructors, solicitors, blah 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 blah. And she's like, what? Driving instructors are on strike?
Just quickly, you had a comment from Sky who said, month for an election are likely contingent on two things: one, bills going through, and a tax break budget announcement plus the 6-week period. So that's Sky's 2 cents on where it would end up landing, what it would require. So I'm guessing would that place it in the autumn for you, Sky, as far as you think?
Yeah, I like this term, statistical gymnastics. I'm going to steal that and pass it off as my own. Thank you, Sky Echo.
Anyway,
but yeah, they are performing statistical gymnastics when so rather than change the problem, let's change the way we count the problems, right? And yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So,
in that case, I'm going to think about wrapping up now because we're slowly reaching the 3-hour mark, which can happen. Does anyone have any closing statements?
One thing I was just going to ask, with your permission, I'd like to take a few clips from this stream and stick them together in a little video just to put up on my channel, and then I'll sort of redirect people back here with a link as well, if you're happy with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool.
Sweet.
Yeah, we have a lot of faces, which is quite good.
Yes.
I'd also say keep up the say final closing thoughts. If Swiss is going to keep on doing Nuzluxes, keep up the political streams so I have something to talk about politically. It's a bit of a joke. Sorry.
Oh yeah, this is. I mean, this is ideal red meat for me to give my subscribers. I'll be like, look, I was on Rowan's channel. We spoke about actual things. Have some of this.
I said yes, autumn 2024. I think we all agree on that, don't we?
Pretty much.
I mean, I'd say October, which is a bit more specific.
But I definitely say after the stream, it seems like there's going to be a very long time before Britain is actually fixed.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, we'll be middle-aged when that happens.
Well, the thing is, right? It takes one political term to destroy something, but it takes multiple political terms to repair it again, right? Which is the kind of one of the problems that Starmer is going to have coming in. The circumstances could not be more different to 1997.
Yeah.
They are like poles apart. So he's going to have this problem when he comes in, and he will be prime minister. Whether he'll have a clear majority or not remains to be seen. And I think that it's going to take a lot, and it's going to take a lot of hard work to repair Britain from where it is now. Because I'm sorry, but Britain is failing on every conceivable measure. It is just failing. So that's my final thought. Nice and happy.
Okay. Final thought on the theme from me, real quick. Then, fixing broken Britain. I don't think I'm not sure if Starmer's Labour are the ones to get it done, but I'm sure as hell certain that the Tories won't get it done. So there you go.
Yeah, I think that would be my closing thought as well. Just that if anything at all happens, the main priority is to get the Tories out, and at the very, very least, all we can aim to hope for is that Labour do anything to make things better. That's all I want. Just come up with something. I mean, it's a very, very low bar, admittedly, but just please do something. Like
I'll look forward, in the run up to the next election, I'll look forward to coming and chatting to you guys with some policy analysis, and see if it's enough. Will it fix the problems? Things like that. So I think that's going to be interesting to do in the future.
I mean, Starmer goes on about sticking plaster politics and saying, it's all short-termist. Well, practice what you preach, and I want to see you do something that actually is for the long term. And like social care, for example, do something like that and prove to us that you actually, want to invest somewhat in the country.
Right. Finally, can I just congratulate Road Dog on having almost 300 subscribers?
Almost. I'm on about, I think, 270 odd.
Yeah, well done.
It was all from me complaining about how terrible Starmer was. People actually wanted to see.
Well, there's not it's not very interesting to say, the government is shit, because everybody knows it. Like, tell us something we don't know. Yeah. We all know that.
But no, thank you for everyone that's watched so far, and thank you to everyone that's subscribed. It would be nice to hit 300 subs.
With any luck, when I stick a few clips up on my channel of this stream, that might just direct a few new people over, and you might get over the line in the next few days. You never know. It'd be nice.
Anyway, brilliant. Thanks everybody for joining the stream and watching, and comment, subscribe to Swiss's channel as well, because he does a lot of live streaming, albeit Pokemon related as well.
Variegated content, as we like to say. Very variegated.
A lot of by-elections, local elections, all the legit stuff that you want to watch. So sub to Swiss, sub to my channel, Road Dog Speaks. And thanks very much for watching.
Bye bye everybody.
Bye.
Good to see you.
Bye.